hedge. He then led 3 daring attacks against Tywin Lannister's rearguard all on his own, before leading Sir Flamant Brax and 1,500 men on a wild goose chase across the Riverlands. Many of the lords that had been present at the start of the war smiled. Harley's Hornwood grinned sadly, probably remembering his late son. Lord Dedding's smile was more vicious than Harley's. Tywin Lannister had sacked his keep and killed his wife. Afterwards, he had joined Sir Brynden. The story was personal to him. After joining our forces, he became invaluable. He raided Jaime Lannister's camp, baiting him into our troop, which is known as the Battle of the Whispering Wood. During the Battle of Riverrun, he commanded the attack on the Lannisters' northern encampment and freed his nephew Ed Muir Tully in the process. The Battle of Oxcross couldn't have happened without him either. His movement with the Outriders masking ours. Lord Harleys and Willis now grinned savagely, as did Lord Roderick Dustin. All had been present at Oxcross, which had been the first victory after hearing of the death of his father. Many still viewed it, and its aftermath, as the revenge the North had claimed on the Westerlands for his execution. He loyally joined and advised me when campaigning in the Westerlands, but his true moments of glory came after. It was his idea to attack Mace Tyrell at Acorn Hall. Without him, we could not have dealt such a decisive blow to the Tyrells, and we would have been overrun at Atranta. During said battle, he commanded the left cavalry. Without him holding that line, our kingdom would have been lost that day. He sighed, as he thought about the horrible battle that had cost him and his kingdom so much. He was there with me at the God's Eye and at the Field of Gold. He commanded the right when we ended the era of dragons for good, and was there when I took Pike and ended House Greyjoy. He summarized his exploits during the war. Nevertheless, his most important achievements were in peacetime. He protected my family, advised me and my council, and oversaw the creation of the Wolfsguard, an institution that will outlive any of us. He looked around, while taking a deep breath. Family, duty, honor, those are the Tully words. Sir Brynden Tully excelled at protecting and aiding his family, while always doing his duty and keeping his honor. I am honored to have been able to call him my uncle. Now we will let him rest. He ended his eulogy. Others, like his mother and Tos, said a few more words, before his body was carried down the stairs into the crypt. In the crypt, another new rite would be performed that the Blackfish himself had thought of. After walking down the stairs, he looked at the stone doorway leading to the small room on the right, which would be the burial tomb of all the Lord Commanders of the Wolfsguard. He had already envisioned cutting a recess in the thick wall on the outside of the doorway. He had talked with a master stonemason, who had known his uncle quite well. It could take over a year, but soon a statue of Sir Brynden Tully would forever flank the last resting place of all future commanders. Only the other members of the Wolfsguard and members of House Stark were allowed down in the crypt, and one by one they all followed him down the stone-cut stairs into the room. Behind him stood Aelys, together with his mother. Arya stood to the side, together with their brothers. Lastly, his sons Rickard and Jon were present, with the former's wife Alara quietly standing next to his eldest son. In a wide circle around the grave stood the 9 members of the Kingsguard. Next to him, somewhat in front of the others, stood Tot. He looked upon the faces of his 8 other sworn guards. Denys Northgard, Morgan Barclay, Sir Pardrick Peage, Sir Dickon Brune, Sir Benedict Blackwood, Sir Jeremy Biglestone, Cedric Sewin and Sir Edmund Grey. All looked grimly towards the grave, where the casket with Sir Brynden's body was being lowered by the servants. Once the servants had left, Tos spoke up. Sir Brynden was the first ever member of the Wolfsguard. He was our Lord Commander. He swore the same oath all of us made. We all remember how it goes. All 9 started to chant in unison. We serve House Stark. We are sworn to obey the Stark's commands, to keep his secrets, to counsel him when requested and to keep silent when not. We vow to defend our king's name and honor. We protect his family. We are the wolves that protect the pack. The guardians that protect the kings of winter. We are members of the Wolfsguard, from now until our dying breath. His uncle had written the text himself, basing it on the oath of the Targaryen's Kingsguard, the vow of the Night's Watch and Stark history. Torrhen spoke up again. Rest now, Sir Brynden Tully, the First Lord Commander of the Wolfsguard. He let a silence fall over the humid stone room, before speaking again. He was our commander. We thanked him for his guidance and duty. Torren spoke, and the other 8 repeated the same words after him. He almost had to smile. It was a piece of the ritual that his uncle had enjoyed writing. I will enjoy them thanking me from the grave, especially Karstark. He had joked, when presenting him with the proposal. He then stepped forward himself. Sir Brynden was the commander of my guard, and my foremost protector and advisor. He was one of my heroes and I owe him my life and my kingdom 10 times over. He sighed, looking at the grave in front of him. He has kept his oath and his lifelong promise. May the gods grant him rest now. He finished with the words he was meant to say. He has kept his oath and lifelong promise. May the gods grant him rest now. All 9 chanted after him. All 9 bowed slightly towards the tomb in silence. Afterwards, the 8 others turned Torren, as his brother-in-law bowed down before him. Torren Karstark, I choose you to now lead my Wolfsguard. Do you accept this honor? He asked him regally. I do, your grace. Alis' brother responded, loud and clear. He nodded in response, before looking over the faces of the other 8 guards. Do you, the men of my guard, accept this man as your commander? We do, your grace. They answered in chorus. Then rise, Lord Commander Torren Karstark of the Wolfsguard. He declared, as he put his hand on his brother-in-law's shoulder. Torren stood up and thanked him with a nod and a silent bow, before going over to his sworn brothers. He walked over to his family, taking his crying mother in his arms. Not much later, they walked out of the crypt together. His staunch advisor and protector was gone, but he and his accomplishments would never be forgotten. Chapter 83, Fighting Amongst Fishes. 28f. There is a 2-year time jump since last chapter, spanning the rest of the winter. As always, relevant changes to the family are visible on the family tree in my bio. I have also added the entire Karstark and Umber family tree, as well as parts of others, as they are now intermingled with the Starks to a significant degree. Rob. It was a beautiful spring day. He stood before the window in his solar, whilst looking over the glowing hills around Winterfell. In the distance, farmers were busy on their lands. He had recently made new farmlands available to the east of the castle. A lot of those lands had lain fallow, others had consisted of small, dispersed woodlands. Many native farming families had rejoiced at his decision, as the lands were all parcelled out to their younger sons and brothers. The families would need to clear and cultivate the lands themselves but could use the wood they cut for themselves first to build farmhouses. After having seen to their own uses, they were forced to send all excess wood to Wintertown. There it could either be used to light fires or as building materials. He hadn't simply given the lands away. The farmers that were rewarded with the lands and materials would need to pay bigger rates of food to him as taxes for the next 30 years. Still, it was a major gift. It had made him beloved with much of the rural population, but it had served much more practical uses as well. The population of his lands had grown. In his youth, Wintertown had had homes for 25,000 people, although only 3,000 permanently lived there. The other homes were only used during winter. That situation had changed. Now, there were living spaces for 40,000 people and 12,000 of those had become permanent. It had become a bustling small town, which traded a lot with the rest of the north. Other villages and towns on his land had also expanded, most notably a fishing village close to the source of the tributary of the White Knife. Formerly, it had been a village of 200 people, where the occasional river barge left from to ship wood downstream. It had always been strategically located, at only 8 miles from Winterfell. Now, it had become a little town of 1,200 people with a harbour that constantly shipped things to and from Castle Sewin, White Harbour and all lands in between and then transported it by cart to Wintertown. His son Ricard had come to jokingly name it Winterport, and the name had stuck. Now, these places needed food. He had already expanded his food production a little over the years, and the continued cultivation of the lands around Moat Cailin helped to feed Winterfell directly, but it was not enough. They were importing a lot from the lands of Houses Tallheart, Sewin, Dustin and Marndaly for their daily use in the castle and towns. This couldn't be helped, but he could make his dependence on them a little less extreme. It also served in pacifying and using the expanded rural population. From Winterfell to the White Knife, Small farmsteads and hamlets were being created in specifically designated areas and its population density was increasing. It was still far below that of the Riverlands or the Reach, but the gap was decreasing slightly. He, his sons, and his brother Rukun had been hard at work to map these out the past months. His brother and sons often traveled his lands to talk with the farmers on where to establish new villages and fields. These men knew the land, what to grow on it and where it was best to sow in fields. They used that expertise as best as they could. He looked upon the eastern hills, with its old and first new farms and how the sun was shining upon the first spring harvest. The hills glowed with wheat, oats and barley, which the farmers would soon start to harvest. His peaceful thoughts were suddenly disturbed by a knock on the door. Not much later, Maester John O's walked into his solar. The Maester looked white in the face and seemed a little out of breath. The Raven scroll was marked as very urgent by Lord Hoster Tully, Your Grace. Once I read it, I ran straight to you. He handed him a small paper. It was written in tiny letters. Clearly, a lot needed to be said on the small scroll. War has broken out in the Riverlands. My youngest brother Elmar has risen up in rebellion against us. He has crowned himself the King of Rivers and Hills with the backing of the Faith Militant, House Footley and other Reacher houses. He may also have support in the Westerlands. Armies are crossing our southern border, while families are rising up in his name all over the Riverlands. I request the armies of the north to contain this revolt. Riverrun and its allies cannot hold this alone. Lord Hoster Tully. He looked upon the Maester. Is this Raoul? I am afraid so, Your Grace. The bird that Lord Tully sent it with is known to me and the outer scroll had all the agreed signals on it. Maester John O's replied. He nodded. Maester, would you be so kind as to walk past the guards' quarters on the ground floor when you walk back? Tell them that I want my 2 sons and brother brought to my solar immediately. Tell no one the reason why. Ask my commander of the King's Guard to go get the hand further in the hole as well. Of course, Your Grace. The Riverlander bowed. He glimpsed out of the window again. Gone were the peaceful thoughts of only minutes ago. Now all he saw was men whose sons would be sent south with his army. All those men were uncertain whether they would ever return to those glowing hills. They just didn't know it yet. It took less than 20 minutes before all had assembled into his solar. He told them all the news and the looks of shock were visible on all their faces. How could this happen? I thought we had had him watched the entire winter. Harry asked him. Tom murmured his agreement with his brother. He sighed. We had the second son Oscar watched in Harrenhal. Berthon managed to get 6 spies inside of the castle, before the boy took direct control of it. During the winter, he found 2 of them, but the others kept reporting any visitors that came and went. We tried to get spies into Pink Maiden, Wayfarer's Rest and Stonehenge, but to no avail. He took a deep breath. After the big fight between the second and third son 2 years ago, we thought that it didn't matter that much anymore. We were watching Oscar closely and could anticipate any of his moves. We didn't expect the youngest son to try and usurp both brothers. Apparently, my youngest cousin felt bold enough to do so after fighting with Oscar. Either that, or he was manipulated by the Faith or the Reach enough to make a gamble for it. It was a mistake of me not to have him watched more closely. What happens now? His 17-year-old son John asked him. He sighed. What I have tried the past 20 years to prevent. You boys will be going to war with me. I will have to call the banners. I want both of you to accompany me, my brothers Rukun and John as well. Last time, when I was injured, all depended on John. Now, I want the full might of House Stark to come down upon those foolish enough to oppose us. Is that wise, Father? We all know the fate that House Gardiner faced when they did the same. His heir asked him. He grinned. But we are not fighting dragons today, my son. I killed the last ones almost 30 years ago. This made the other 4 men smile. Besides, your children will remain here. If the worst was to happen, Bran will be appointed regent with Harry as Hand of the King. Their 2 great-uncles won't let anything happen to them. Ricard nodded at that. You want me to stay? Lord Harry on Karstark asked. If you would agree to stay behind. There is no one that I can trust with both the kingdom and my family as much as you. He agreed. His brother-in-law scratched his beard. I guess my sons are old enough to lead the Karstark forces. My wife and daughter-in-law could rule Karhold in the name of my 5-year-old grandson. It wouldn't be ideal, but Karhold and the Karstark line would be safe enough. Edric and Rickon will not shame the family name in battle either. It could work. Thank you, Harry. Ricard and I will keep your boys close in positions of honor deserving of their status. They will have more than enough chances at glory, but they will never serve in the vanguard or the first assault. They are my nephews as well. I will do my best to make sure they return to you. He answered. Harry nodded appreciatively. Thank you, Your Grace. Nothing would please me more. Torren looked relieved as well. Harry, you will rule the north in my absence. Alis will rule Winterfell and I will personally take care of the Riverlands. Harry, would you keep an eye on my grandchildren's educations from time to time? The Lord of Karhold nodded. It would be my pleasure. Thank you. He told the man that had always been as an older brother to him. Ricard, call the council together. John, you will join too. He looked at his youngest son. You are my son and as such you are one of the commanders of my army. I will have you informed from now on. You are to join every council or command meeting from now until we are back home. He commanded. Rickon and Torren laughed at his son, as he put an arm around him. Welcome on board, nephew. You will now step into the wonderful world of old men bickering, while they order the younger men in their lives to do what they have decided amongst themselves. His youngest son shrugged. I'll be executing their orders anyway. Might as well bicker back. Rickon laughed loudly, and it helped ease the tension. What will you do, father? Ricard asked. I will call the banners. I have a lot of letters to write. All men nodded. I want a quick response. Last time I arrived, Riverrun was under siege and the Riverlords had been defeated, their troops scattered to the winds. I want to arrive before that happens. Last time, I arrived in the Riverlands 8 weeks after calling the banners. Now, I will make that less than 7. We leave Winterfell in 25 days. We leave Moat Cail in 20 days after that. I will ask the lords to assemble on either of those points. He ordered. Harry frowned. That won't allow the furthest houses to fully levi their forces. My sons, the Umbers, the Whitefys, the Mormonts, Shields and even Ryswells will be hard-pressed to fully assemble their troops, the mountain clans won't rally at all. He nodded. But speed is key here. I want to race south with at least 15,000 men and catch the rebels by surprise. We have a lot of allies in the Riverlands, which will be waiting on our guidance. Before we encounter any enemies, we will be able to link up with the Freys and Mallisters. He walked to his desk and pulled out a map of the Riverlands. He pointed to the areas where the families lived. Our allies along the Blackwater and around Riverrun must resist until we arrive. If we are too late the damage could be horrible. The Daearys and Mutongs will be in trouble too, after both their heirs have announced their betrothals to Bran's daughters this winter. Most agreed with that, except for his youngest son. 15,000. That's less than half of what the North can call upon. You would leave most of our strength at home against the might of the Reach. No, look at what Hoster wrote. He mentions House Footley and others, but never House Tyrell. We will not be facing the great army of the Reach. We would have received word of our spies in Highgarden if the young king had marched. He probably knew we were watching him and used House Footley as a proxy. We will only encounter the border lords. If it becomes clear that the Tyrells are mustering behind them, we call the others south. In the meantime, we take care of the rebels. He told his boy, who relented. For now, I will order the lords to mostly call upon old men, second sons and those without a future. Those who won't mind not coming back and are eager for the glory and future prospects that can be found at the end of a blade. The others can be rallied later. He sighed. His sons were too young to understand that command, but the other 3 men nodded understandingly. Now go, you all have your orders. They all nodded. They walked out of the room, while he bowed himself over the map for a minute. He walked through the preliminary plan that was forming in his head. He needed more information. He would do the same he had done 30 years ago and march towards the twins. Oliver would help him. There he could more accurately decide on a specific strategy. He walked out of his solar, Torren easily falling in line beside him. 7 weeks later. He let out a breath he didn't know that he had been holding when he finally rode through the portcullis of the eastern castle of the twins. Next to him rode his 2 sons, behind them rode John, To and Rukon. Their 5 direwolves trotted in front of them, which made the honor line of soldiers jump back in fear. His sons' direwolves, Ash and Fang, had grown to the same sizes as the others. They looked menacing, but he knew they weren't as strong. Grey Wind, Ghost and Shaggydoke had years of battle experience. The first 2 in his earlier campaigns and Shaggy in Essos. Ash and Fang were largely untested, although they didn't look less threatening. In front of him stood his former squire Oliver, now the knight of the twins. Next to him stood his cousin twice removed and wife Walder Free. She had her expected scowl on her face. He knew she never forgave him for what he had done to her family, but frankly he didn't care. They shouldn't have betrayed him. Their 2 sons stood next to them with their wives and small children. One of the terms for House Free had been that they hadn't been able to choose whom they could marry their children to. The heir, Sir Winfrey, was raised under his uncle Ed Muir in Riverrun. Later, he had had him married off to a Blackwood cousin. A useful connection to a side branch of one of his staunchest supporters in the Riverlands. His brother, Sir Frank Flinfrey, had simply been married to the daughter of one of their remaining landed vassals. A totally irrelevant marriage politically, while helping Oliver's grip on his lands. Their absent sister had been married off to the 3rd son of House Peach. Again, allied to a house that supported him and Hoster Tully, and again to a side branch. Sir Oliver bowed lowly, and his family and household followed suit. "The twins are yours, your grace." He jumped from his horse, and his sons and brothers followed suit. "Rise, Sir Oliver," he replied formally, before walking over to his friend and hugging him tightly. "It has been too long, Oliver. It is good to see you. It saddens me that it needs to be under these circumstances." His former squire nodded severely. "I got your message in time. I raised 1,100 men that are ready to march. Both me and my sons will join you." "That is wonderful news, good friend. Please reacquaint me with your family, afterwards we will talk in your solar," he responded, and his friend obliged happily. After some small talk with the Free family and household, they headed towards the solar, but he turned at the last moment. "Sir Pewin, Sir Franklin, I would be happy if you would care to join us." Both Free knights looked at him in shock, as did their father. He looked at Oliver. "My sons will be joining too, and both of yours are older than my youngest. Besides, if they will fight for me then they are eligible to join me and know how and why." Oliver looked surprised, but pleased and nodded in thanks. His youngest son looked proud, whilst his elder seemed cautious but content. He nodded to both his own sons, and they knew what he meant. "Befriend the boys. We need the support of the future generations of the Riverlands now more than ever." Rukon, John and To followed him silently, whilst the majority of his lords talked about provisions and how to best set up camp with Oliver's steward. The 5 direwolves lazily walked beside them, scaring off all the servants that they came across inside. The solar they walked in was rather small, but it could house the 9 men that walked inside. The problem was the 5 gigantic direwolves, but most bundled together at the fire. Only Ghost stayed close to John, laying beneath the table between all their feet. This seemed to put off Oliver's sons, while his old friend didn't seem to mind. He even fed the albino wolf a snack under the table. Apparently, both remembered each other well. "How is the situation now in the Riverlands, Oliver?" he asked, while Sir Franklin spread a map of the region out over the table. "Bad, your grace. Sir Elmar Tully has marched into the Riverlands from the south with 5,000 men from the Reach under Lord Footley. Many amongst their host are claimants to the lands that you have forced them out under the treaty with Willers Tyrell. The Faith militant has also joined him in his march with at least 4,000 men," his vassal said, while pointed it out on the map. "Those forces initially put the keeps of Houses Parrel and Menning under siege. In the meantime, they were reinforced by allies from the west." Oliver's finger switched towards Pink Maiden. "House Piper has raised their banner in support of the rebellion." They managed to get their cousins of House Lefford on board too. 2,500 Westerlanders have marched under two sons of Lady Alisanne. 2,000 mercenaries from the west have also joined them, paid by Houses Lefford, Payne and the Starry September. They joined together with Lord Piper's 1,500 men and joined Elmar. He explained, while pointing again to the Gold Road castles. Both castles were stormed and fell quickly. Lord Parrell and Menning were killed, together with some of their sons, and their remaining children were shipped off to Tumbleton. Oliver paused a little, taking a sip of wine in the meantime. Their next target was Stony September. There they met 2,000 men sent by Lord Tully under the leadership of Lord Roger. Lord Roger was supposed to be a vanguard sent there to secure Stony September, before the rest of the Riverlands forces could arrive, but the enemies took the keeps along the Gold Road much quicker than expected. Meanwhile, raising the forces of the Riverlands proved harder than expected due to many lords remaining neutral, and others being drawn into skirmishes with scattered rebel houses. Lord Roger was soundly defeated outside of the walls of Stony September, together with a part of the town's forces. Lord Roger and his fell in battle, and Stony September surrendered right after to save itself from being sacked. Oliver continued. Stony September has been taken. Ricard asked in surprise. The three Freys nodded seriously. Please, Oliver, continue. He spoke up stoically. The enemy is now regrouping around Stony September, with more rebels joining them there. Lord Perrin has raised his troops in support of him there and Lord Keith seems to be marching to join him. Every day, zealous peasants spurred on by the High Septon, reach Stony September to take up arms against the heathen Starks. Oliver pointed out awkwardly, he ignored the quoted insult. The High Septon, who could have seen that coming? Rickon scoffed. The fat prick is descendant from House Tyrell himself. If he has called for our destruction, it has been done on the orders of Highgarden. His father was a Tyrell bastard. He wouldn't lift a finger without the backing of House Tyrell. He looked at his younger brother, who fell silent. He agreed with every word he had said, but this outburst wouldn't help them further now. They could speak of this afterwards amongst themselves. He signalled Oliver to continue. Small knightly houses and hedge knights also Elmar in Stony September. His numbers grow by the day, and we soon expect them to start marching on Riverrun and take control of the western Riverlands. There are some who mention the Brackens, Vances of Wayfarer's Rest and Smallwoods joining him. However, other reports specifically mention that their lords remained neutral. We will need to investigate that. Those houses could make an almost 5,000 men difference. We need to know who we are up against. He replied. Certainly, Your Grace. Lord Tully has already sent out scouts to check on those houses and we will expect to hear about his results soon. He nodded. Then we will leave this point for now, please. He motioned for the man to carry on. The other main rebel houses are scattered around the region. Aside from the Pipers and Perrins, the Terricks, Keiths, Lollistons, Cresses, Rollingfords and Stokeworths have risen in rebellion. He cursed. I gave Sir Desmond Grohl Stokeworth on a silver platter. He has been dead for less than 3 years and his sons betray me. Sir Winfrey responded. Sadly, yes, Your Grace. There is more. He looked towards his father for permission, who let him speak. While the Gold Road castles were being sieged, the Terricks blocked the houses of the eastern Riverlands from joining their lord in Riverrun and maybe form a defence around Stony September. In response, Houses Deary and Mouton banded together and managed to bring a coalition together with the houses of Cracklaw Point. Together, they defeated the Terricks at the Green Fork, with the help of House Greensnake, who attacked the Terricks from behind. The battered forces of Lord Terrick fled back to their keep after the battle. The coalition's forces have pursued him and are laying siege to his keep. The heir to the twins explained. This was met with grunts of approval. It seemed that the alliances that he had made this winter had paid off. Bran had fostered with Lords Deary and Mouton in Riverrun and called both men his friends. By betrothing his daughters to their heirs, he had formally allied them to House Stark. He himself had made sure that their dowries had been very high, thereby effectively buying Maidenpool and Deary's loyalty for the next few decades. At the same time, House Stokeworth attacked Rosby. His forces were augmented by 1,000 zealous armed peasants and troops from minor houses around Blackwater Bay. He put Rosby under siege but was defeated under its walls when the sons of Lord Sumber arrived. Afterwards, Houses Rosby and Sumber marched towards Hayford and defeated a group of minor nobles there who had gathered around Lord Cress's forces and were besieging the castle. That last force was completely put to the sword by all three houses. Sir Pewin explained. Rooken whistled. Castle doesn't play around, it seems. Neither do Alaric, or the sons of Roderick Umber. Tor remarked. The Riverlander heir looked at him for permission to continue, which he granted with a nod. Yesterday, more good news came in. The Sumbers, Rosbys and Hayfords, after ridding themselves of hostile elements in their immediate lands, quickly marched on Stokeworth and together with fresh reinforcements from House Riker they immediately stormed the castle. They took it after a brutal attack. The male line of House Stokeworth ended in the process, whether they were all executed or died in the fighting is uncertain. Todd grinned coldly. We are speaking about Umbers and my cousin Alaric. I wouldn't count on anything being accidental. The two young free knights swallowed and looked at each other. He decided to take over the meeting now. So, if I understand it all well, the situation is like this. The rebels are decisively winning in the south and southwest, bolstered with troops from the Westerlands and Reach. In the meantime, they are losing terrain in the east and southeast. He pointed out on the map. Yes, Your Grace, however, the situation in the center and east remains tense. Thousands of scattered zealots remain dispersed across the Riverlands. They attack all villages consisting of Old Gods believers. These circumstances force the Blackwater Bay forces to remain close to their lands. It has also forced the Blackwoods, Goodwoods and Peages to leave considerable forces at home when they marched to the aid of Lord Tully. Oliver answered. On top of that, you have House Rollingford in the former Crown lands, who is trying to gather the scattered forces of the enemy around him in the area. For now, he seems preoccupied, but he remains a threat to the houses around Blackwater Bay. How many men have already gathered at Riverrun? His brother John, jokingly nicknamed by Rooken as John the Elder, asked. Some 8,000, I guess. As mentioned before, the forces of Houses Blackwood, Goodwood and Peage have only partly joined Lord Tully. Meanwhile he has lost over 1,500 men of his own retinue and that of House Roger under the latter's lord at Stony September. House Mallister has arrived with all its might, as well as Houses Deddings and Biglestone. Only 8,000? John asked surprised. They will be heavily outnumbered by the rebels, if they reach Riverrun before us. The phrase nodded solemnly. Yes, but the king ordered us to remain here, so we did. The other houses in the Riverlands are either remaining neutral or are unable to get to Riverrun. What about the Brackens, Vances, Leicesters, Mallorys, Waynes and others? His son John, or John the Younger, asked. It seems like they are all remaining neutral for now, but there are mixed reports. My guess is that they are waiting to see how the wind blows. Oliver replied, which led to curses amongst his own kinsmen. Sir Franklin looked at him. Your Grace, if I may ask, how many men did you bring with you? He looked upon his friend's youngest son. 17,000 men from the north have marched with me through the causeway. Amongst them almost all of my most veteran commanders. I also left 1,000 men under my brother Brandon to guard Moat Cailin. On our march south, Sir Hugo Morass joined us with 500 men as well. Hugo Morass He is the younger brother of Lord Vance of Atranta, is he not? Oliver asked him. He nodded affirmatively. Could he persuade his brother to join our cause? He doesn't know. His brother doesn't seem to answer his ravens. However, he has sent him a bird to at least stay neutral with the message that he and his sons don't want to fight his kin. He seems to think that this will work. He replied. That's something, at least. The Vances are allies of the Pipers and Brackens, forcing them to stay neutral could significantly weaken their side. The Knight of the Twins remarked. He nodded and looked over the map on the table. What are you thinking, Rob? John, the elder, asked him. For a moment, it seemed as if they were 30 years back in time. He, John, Tor and Oliver, standing over a map of the Riverlands and deciding on what to do. Then he looked upon the faces of his two sons and he once again realized that everything was different. Nothing just yet. He lied. His brother immediately saw through him but seemed to understand that he didn't want it discussed right away. Ricard, write to the army and oversee that the camp is set out to our standards. We will stay here for multiple days, and enemies are all around us. I want the camp secure. Tell the commanders that we will hold a war council in the Great Hall in 4 hours. All lords and heirs, or other seconds in command, are invited. He told his heir. Aye, father. Ricard nodded, before immediately leaving. Ash stretched himself out before the fire, before following his master. Brother, he turned to Rickon, you will send scouts to the east and south. Make sure that nobody creeps up on us. Send some over the bridge to the west as well. I don't want any surprises. We are fighting a full-scale rebellion. We don't know what friendly territory is and I don't want to encounter any surprises. His youngest brother turned around, whistling to Shaggy to follow him out. His youngest brother had grown into one of his most trusted advisors ever since he returned from Essos. No words were needed to know that he would accomplish the task he had commanded. The youngest free son looked at him. May I ask you a question, Your Grace? He nodded. Why did you only bring 17,000 men south? Why not more? The north should be able to raise much more, no. Because I don't think that I'll need more. He dismissed the comment. Speed is of the essence here, not manpower. A prolonged war will weaken the Riverlands and entrench Elmar's power base and support from the Reach. I will crush my young cousin before the year is over and may the gods help those that chose to follow or influence him. They will need it. Sir Franklin Free swallowed visibly but bowed his head. Brother, he turned towards John. I want you to talk with Sir Pewin here about the defenses and supplies at the Twins. I want you to get acquainted with the local situation as much as possible before the War Council. He told his right hand, who shrugged before walking out with the free air and Ghost. He then looked to his namesake. Son, Sir Franklin is clearly not impressed yet with our northern prowess. He thinks 17,000 of us aren't enough to crush this revolt. Will you change his mind? Show him the camp and introduce him to your cousins. His son grinned. Which cousins, father? We brought too many. Doesn't matter too much, I don't think. He shrugged. However, the Karstarks might make the biggest impact on him. He mused, whilst scratching his beard. Tot chuckled softly from behind him and even Oliver seemed to smile. Harry's sons? His old friend asked. Aye, with his Umber wife. He responded knowingly, which served to raise Oliver's eyebrows into his hairline. The Knight of the Twins turned towards John. Don't get him too drunk, boy, I know how your cousins work. I have shared ale with their father and uncles many times. John laughed loudly. I will do my best, but can't promise anything, Sir Oliver. Karstarks and Umbers have a natural desire for ale, and I am half Karstark myself. He laughed loudly, and so did Tom behind him. Oliver simply shook his head in amusement. He clasped his son Franklin's shoulder. Don't shame my name, boy. It took me years to prove their father Harry that I was worth partaking in his limited supply of northern ale. I would not want to lose that hard-won privilege. The youngest free son looked oddly at his father but shrugged and followed John and Fang out. He sat himself down at the table with Oliver and To. You don't happen to have any of that northern ale in your cellars, do you? Oliver laughed. As Harry always said, it is an acquired taste. Well, once I acquired it, I couldn't get enough. Bran has been providing me with barrels of ale throughout the years. I had one opened the moment your army was sighted. I didn't want to hear Smalljan berate me when he had to wait for his mug. Oliver called out loudly, and one of his guards opened the door in response. Have the servants bring us 3 mugs of northern ale. Make haste of it, the king is thirsty. Not much later, the mugs arrived. They spent the rest of the afternoon catching up. They told stories about their families and Oliver told him about the 5 children of his sons and how he loved spending time with them. How the Twins had become a loving place for his family and how thankful he still was for the chance that Robb had given him. In turn, he told him about his children and grandchildren. He told them about how their friends' families were faring and how life in the north was going. For a few hours, it seemed like peace had returned and he was simply touring the Riverlands once more. When it was time to come back to reality, they walked to the Great Hall. Before the meeting began, he had talks with his brothers and Klee. He told them of his plans and what he wanted them to do during the meeting. They started the war council by explaining the situation in the Riverlands. Around the table stood the highest nobles of the north, as well as his Sir Oliver Free and Sir Hugo Maras. Closest to him stood Ricard and Lord Smalljanumber, who had taken over the mantle of his deceased father this winter. Also present were his brother-in-law Lord Domeric Bolton, his son-in-law Lord Goran Glover, Lady Daisy Mormont, Lady Alisanne Shield, Lord Timothy Flint, Lord Donald Locke, Lord Roger Riswell, Lord Artos Iron Smith, Lord Harleys Hornwood, Master Brandon Tallheart, Lord Cregan Slate, Lord Manfred Woolfield and Lord Robin Flint. Some heirs also stood in the inner circle around the large oaken table placed in the middle of the Great Hall. They stood there because their lordly fathers or grandfathers remained in the north. These were Sir Wyman Marndaly, Ellard Dustin, Edric Carstark and unexpectedly Myron Reed. The 21-year-old grandson of old Lord Howland Reed had joined him when marching through the causeway with 200 Cranogmen. He came in name of Lord Howland to help him in the war. The unit was apparently specialized in tracking and scouting and could help catch the groups of fanatics scattered across the Riverlands. Behind those main lords and heirs, stood minor lords from all over the north. Those sworn to the vassals standing beside the table. Further back, on top of the benches, stood the adult heirs of the main lords. For the 4 heirs in the front, he had allowed their brothers, uncles or other seconds in command to take place on the benches. Many of those were family or friends of either of his sons. You had Osric Umber, Harmond Umber /Marndaly, Darren Hornwood, Benfred Tallheart, Gia Mormont, Donna Shield, Denise Dustin, Donald Slate, Andrew Locke, Benjamin Riswell, Brandon Woolfield, Brian Flint, Donald Flint, Torrin Iron Smith, Edric Castle and Barthogan Fenn. Most notably were his son John, his nephews Bryndon Stark, Meager Sewin, Baltasar Bolton and his wife's other nephew Rickon Carstark and her cousin Osric's son Veon Poole. Lastly, you had his grandson Galbart Glover next to him. The 11-year-old boy was serving as his cupbearer and as one of his squires. He looked upon his vassals and kinsmen, as they were shouting their opinion on what plan they would need to follow. We should just march on Riverrun and from then on towards Stony September. We cut off the head of the snake and end this war quickly. Lord Roger Riswell shouted. If we do that, we leave our supply lines in danger. We also endanger ourselves to a Tyrell ambush without any more information. Lord Harleys Hornwood rebuffed the proposal in shock. This went back and forth multiple times before John, the elder, spoke. He was standing next to Lady Daisy Mormont and Master Brandon Tallheart. What if we split our forces? We did it before at the Twins. We could do it again. Most men became silent, as they all respected John's skills in governance and warfare. Split how? Domeric asked intrigued. We send a large force towards Riverrun to halt the advance of the Reachmen and Westerlanders, at the same time we mop up the organized resistance east of it. The Lord of Sea Dragon Point spoke with authority. Wouldn't we splinter our forces and risk facing Elmar at Riverrun with only part of our forces? Sir Wyman Marndaly replied. That seems unlikely, doesn't it? Elmar is still regrouping at the Stony September. It seems that fanatics and lower nobles are joining his army every day there. He will need to arm and organize those or risk losing control of his forces. This will take time. We could be in Riverrun in a few days. There, we would be joined by at least 8,000 Riverlanders under Lord Tully. Lord Cleesewin responded. Even so, what would be the benefit of dividing our forces? Lord Donald Locke asked. As Sir Wyman pointed out, it would defend our supply lines. If we push south, the rebels can never hope to reach the Twins. More importantly, we could quickly free the forces of the Diaries, Mutongs, Greensnakes and the houses of Cracklaw Point. In a second stage, we could also free our kinsmen in Blackwater Bay. They are being attacked and prosecuted from all sides. It is our duty to help them, if we can. John countered. Many loudly supported the plan, the Umbers, Carstarks and Sewins chiefly amongst them. It was their kin that was being leading the defense against the fanatics there, but others also had kin that had migrated to the area. Their uncles and cousins also shouted their support for them through the Great Hall. My uncle and cousins have proven themselves by defeating the Stokeworths and a coalition of local and all nobility. They even sacked the former's castle. They would be great additions to the army, yet they are stuck because of constant raids into their lands. Raids that kill innocent Northmen and Riverlanders alike, simply because they won't believe in their pesky religion. I will gladly march to help them. Smalljan's booming voice echoed through the hall. He almost smiled. His plan was working perfectly. What would the Eastern force do? Lord Timothy Flint asked. Now it was Rooken's task to put the last nail in the coffin. We should hit Lolliston Grove and Falconry Tower, the seats of houses Lolliston and Terrick. His brother took a step forwards. The Lollistons are raiding neighbouring allies of us like the Goodwoods and Dearies, which forced them to split their forces. Their build-up is also scaring the other surrounding houses and obstructing them from fully marching towards Riverrun. Defeating them could free a lot of scattered troops. Rooken explained the plan he had told him beforehand. We could also send reinforcement to Falconry Tower. The keep is already under siege, but the Riverlanders seem unable to take it. With some of our men, its resistance would quickly falter. When we have taken those two keeps, we have destroyed the mere strongholds of the rebels in the centre Riverlands. After that, nothing more than small holdfasts and towers of knightly houses remain north of Harrenhal. You think that we can achieve this quickly enough to rally back in Riverrun before confronting Elmar himself? Domeric asked Rooken, whilst throwing suspicious glances his way. It was clear that he suspected that this was all his plan. Aye, and if we do, we could count on thousands of extra Riverlanders to join us. His little brother responded perfectly. We could make the Twins our supply base. We fortify it and leave a strong force here. This would ensure the possibility of calling up more Northmen in the future, would the need arise. I couldn't rally all my men in time to march south. I could easily command my younger brother to send another 1,000 men south. Smalljan remarked. Lord Hornwood agreed with that. Aye, we need to keep the way between Riverrun and the north open. It is important that the Twins, Seaguard and Raventree Hall remain securely in our hands. He pointed out on the map. What do we do if Elmar marches early? Lady Daisy Mormont asked. John, next to her, shrugged. Two options. The first one is that we rally as many of our men as we can around us and we make our stand. The Riverlands aren't that large, and some of the reinforcements won't be too far away anyway. Or we fortify the castle, pull back, regroup and strike back 10 times as hard. Most men seemed to agree with that. Does anyone have anything against the plan? He finally spoke. None spoke up, although Lord Riswell looked like it was all a waste of time. It wasn't a coincidence. He was the only man in the room that was older than him without any fighting experience during the past wars, if you discount skirmishes with a few dozen Ironborn. Then I would propose the following. He spoke loudly. I march on Riverrun with 10,000 men, amongst them the Riverlander forces of House Morass and half of those of House Free. 1,500 men remain here in the Twins together with 500 of House Free under Lord Hornwood. He has proven himself in the past wars to have great skills in fortifying settlements, raising troops, throwing back raiders and raising and training new troops. He continued. Lord Harley's beamed of pride at the compliments, and nobody rejected. 4,000 men under my son Ricard will march on Lolliston Grove. He looked towards his heir. The Lollistons are a weak house, even with their band of fanatics. You will gather local allies to your side, before striking the keep and putting an end to their madness. You will do this with forces from houses Stark, Umber and Bolton. Lords Umber and Bolton will be your seconds in command. He told his son. He hadn't chosen those two by accident. They were powerful lords. More so, they were experienced and capable commanders who would advise him well. Domeric was his son's uncle and Smalljan his father-in-law. Both could be trusted to serve him without harmful ulterior motives. Lord Reed and his special force of light troops will join you as well. Use them to get rid of as many fanatic rabble as possible. Make a showing of it. I want tales of their fates spreading far and wide. Armed religious groups have been banned from this kingdom since its founding. It is time they realize this. Maybe it can help others to think twice before joining their doomed cause. If not, it will give us the opportunity to get rid of all of them once and for all. He commanded Ricard, who nodded eagerly. Then he looked to his other side. My brother Rickon will lead 2,000 men against House Terrick. Houses Flint of Widow Swatch, Locke and Woolfield will march under him. He looked across the room. These rebels have directly challenged House Stark by crowning my baby cousin king. I want them to see the direwolf banner coming towards them as they realize their impending doom. All men seemed to agree with that. They could hardly contest his or his heir's command, especially with the backing of Lords Umber and Bolton. Rickon's own exploits in Essos had become widespread knowledge. All knew that one couldn't rise in a sellsword company that quickly without skill of command. Besides, many of their sons, brothers or cousins had joined him on his travels and heard of his experience firsthand. All other houses will march under me to Riverrun. If my calculations are correct, that should be a force of over 10,000. He concluded. All of his lords nodded approvingly. Your Grace, if I may. Lord Harley's Hornwood asked. Of course, Lord Harley's. He confirmed. My forces only count 1,000 men and I know that my grandson will want to see some of the fighting. As such, I would have him march with you with my 200 cavalry. This leaves me 700 men short to fulfill your orders. The old lord explained his problem. He looked on the benches to the face of the young Darin Hornwood. Lord Harley's grandson had been named after his late heir and his old friend. Lord Harley's son Leonce had remained at home to rule the Hornwood. There were still those who looked down upon him for his former bastardry. For that reason, Leonce mainly focused himself on his family's lands and his son took up relations with the other northern families with Lord Harley's. None dared to look down upon Darin for his father's low-born mother, as the boy's own Umber mother's outrage was widely known. Darin's good connection to his mother's cousin Smalljan and his sons also helped him a lot. His early winter marriage to Sansa's youngest daughter Barbary Bolton cemented his place amongst his peers. The young man laughed happily when his grandfather announced that he would fight. He knew that this was hard on Lord Harley's. He had once lost his only legitimate child in war. To let his future heir fight now was not an easy thing, although it helped that he had another grandson and granddaughter safely back in the north this time. You are right, Lord Harley's. He looked around the room. 200 men from houses Dustin, Flint of Flint's Finger and Tall Heart will remain under your command too. Combined with another 100 of House Slate. He made eye contact with all the lords of these houses, but they simply nodded their agreement. What do we with House Rollingford? Edric Karstark asked. House Reitka seems to have come to the help of our kinsman's forces in Stokeworth. The Reitkas are strong, and I will order them to help them hold off any attack on the lands around the Blackwater. We will send some reinforcements to them in time, but the vast majority of our forces are needed in Riverrun. After the fall of the main rebel settlements in the east, most of our northern forces will rejoin together in Riverrun. The remaining peasant bands can be cleared up by the local nobility with only a few hundred of our own men. With a strong northern center, we will break those Andal mercenaries my young cousin has gathered around him. Approval roared out of dozens of northern throats, as the lords hit their fists upon the table and the youths hit their leather boots on the wooden benches. When the noise died down, he spoke again. All three forces leave at daybreak in 3 days. I expect your men to be well rested, but ready. He commanded, whilst looking in the eyes of many of his commanders. All nodded and left the great hall to go back to their troops. In the end, only some of his family members and Wulfsguard stayed behind. Ricard remained silent next to him, as he was concentrating on the maps in front of him. Jon and Brynden walked over to him. Has there been any word from home? His youngest son asked him. He shook his head. Jon sighed, but understandably so. He walked over to him and put a hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, son. The women are safe. Your mother is there to take care of your new wife. Lysa's grandfather, Lord Roderick Dustin, is also in Winterfell. I know that it's hard, but there is nothing that we can do here except winning this war so they will be safe in the future. He said compassionately. Jon sighed once more and looked up at him and his elder brother. How do you two do it? How do you leave them behind like this? Especially in her pregnant state, I don't know what to do. He shared a look with his eldest son, before answering. We have no other choice. If we were to remain home, home would crumble around them. It is our duty to our house and to them to fight this war. My last war in the Riverlands I first fought for my father's freedom and my grandfather's lands. After that, I fought for the survival of our house. You have only had the life you were born into because I won that conflict. We must now do the same or the lives of your wife, sister, your siblings, many children and millions of others in the Riverlands will be in danger. Ricard nodded in agreement. He walked over to his younger brother. Father is right. You must focus on what you can control. You can't control anything that happens in Winterfell, not even Father can. That rests with Mother, Uncle Harry and the Maester. Alera is pregnant too, John. On top of that, I already have 3 healthy children at home. Do you think that I do not worry? I do, but I have no other choice than to continue. His heir said. You don't have a choice either. You must accompany Father to Riverrun and help host her. I will be gone for multiple weeks, at least. You and Brynden will need to help Father to represent our house in my absence. You are a prince, John. More importantly, you are a Stark. You were made for this. We have been leading the armies of the North for 8,000 years, you aren't the first to feel unsure or homesick. Our ancestors overcame it because they knew that winter was always coming. You know what happens to those that despair in the face of winter. Those that live of summer and try to ignore the coming of winter. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, and John knew it. They die. His youngest son replied. They do. Ricard replied. You aren't dying, brother. Our sisters are all leaving Winterfell. Who else am I going to annoy when we get back? His eldest grinned. Both his sons grinned at each other. You aren't king yet, rookie. Everything you throw at me I will throw right back in your face. John countered good-naturedly. Everybody laughed, as Ricard rolled his eyes. He looked upon the scene with pride. These two were the future of House Stark, together with their cousin next to them. The only 3 males born with the name Stark of the next generation. They had to carry on the pack, after he was gone. If they handled like this, the pack would be in safe hands. He walked over to his nephew. Bran's son was a good friend of his son John and he had been thought well. He had fostered for years with House Blackwood, and he knew that the 17-year-old looked forward to seeing them again. How are you holding up? He asked Brynden. Well enough, I think. The boy shrugged. A mixture of excitement, anticipation and uncertainty would be the best way to describe it. He nodded. That's normal. I still feel the same way, even after all these years. Don't worry too much. You are capable with a sword and well protected. He told him, while nodding to Sir Benedict Blackwood. Sir Benedict had always been his brother's protector, but Bran had ordered him to protect his son in battle. Bryn laughed. My cousin has a way with his sword. He is also extremely motivated, after what those fanatics are doing to his homeland. They have explicitly called for the destruction of House Blackwood and all other Old Gods believers south of the Neck. He looked into the eyes of the Kingsguard member with whom he had spent the least amount of time these last years, as he had remained with Bran in Moat Cailin. The knight answered his stare without hesitation. I won't fail you, your grace. I will not hesitate to cut as many of those filthy fanatics down as I can, but not at the cost of Prince Brynden or anyone else of the royal family. I serve at you and your family's pleasure. I know where my priorities lay. Good to hear, Sir Benedict. However, rest assured that everyone responsible will face my wrath. Vengeance will still be yours, even if it is not always at the edge of your own steel. He replied. The knight had been loyal for over 2 decades. He had nothing but respect for the man. He deserved to know that the repercussions for this so-called holy war would be dire for his family's enemies. He looked back to the 3 male Starks in front of him. You will all do well. You are Starks of Winterfell, and my kin. All 3 of you will get commands, starting with Ricard. You two will have your chance to shine, but I need you to remain patient for now. We need to act quickly to stop the force at Riverrun from being destroyed. All nodded. Good, you will do me proud, I know that. He finally turned around and shouted loudly. Galbart, come here, I know you that you have been listening in on the conversation. Make yourself useful and fill us all a cup of ale. Afterwards, you may sit with us. He told his eldest grandson, who sheepishly appeared from behind a free curtain. How did you know, grandfather? The 11-year-old Glover asked him in surprise, as he shuffled on his feet at the other side of the hall. Lad, come here. He told him, and the boy quickly obliged. He put his hand on the lad's 2 shoulders and turned him around. Look around the hall. What do you see? He asked him. Together they slowly scanned the room. Looking past the furniture, wolf guards and members of House Stark. The boy didn't seem to understand, until his eyes went wide. The direwolves. He inclined his head. Now, never make the mistake again to think that 4 male adult direwolves won't know where you are. They can smell and hear you from very far away. If you were anyone else spying, they would have attacked you. He chastised him lightly. However, they know you. You are kin, and your mother, as my daughter, has a direwolf of her own. I know that you have always been raised with a direwolf near and that you do not fear them, but never make the mistake of underestimating them. These are no mere dogs. Grey Wind could snap your head off before you would have time to react. Ash, Fang and Storm wouldn't be much slower. He told him seriously. The boy's eyes widened. They wouldn't do so, would they, grandfather? He shook his head. They won't, but you should never underestimate them again. They don't like it. He latched onto the small pull in the back of his head and made Grey Wind bark to emphasize the point. After all these years, he could do this without thinking. The boy startled, before looked down and mumbled an apology towards the oldest direwolf. All Starks laughed in response. Now get us that ale, grandson. In turn, I will tell you a story of the past wars of your choosing. As long as it doesn't concern this castle, that is. He had no intention to tell the boy what his other grandfather had done here to House Free all those years ago. He was too young for that, and quite frankly he didn't want to remember it either. The boy brought 4 cups for them, and a watered-down cup for himself, and he spent the next half an hour telling his kin about his battles against the Dragon Queen. Chapter 84, The Home of the Trout. 28f. Rob. He looked upon the face of his daughter, and she seemed almost as relieved to see him as he was to see her. He guided his horse across the courtyard close to her, before jumping off. Forgetting all decorum, she skipped over to him and hugged him tightly. Father, it is so good to see you. Sarah called out. He embraced her back on one side, careful not to hurt the baby she was holding on her other arm. It is good to see you too, little girl. He whispered in her ear. When she finally released him, she greeted her brother John and cousin Bryndon in quick succession. Her direwolf seemed equally happy, as she danced around with her packmates. He looked expectingly at her, before she realized that she hadn't yet introduced him to his grandchildren. She laughed loudly at her stupidity, before softly handing her the baby in her arms. This is my youngest, Dela. She told him, and he looked at the baby girl that had been thrust into his arms. She couldn't be more than 5 months old. Dela had the same blue-grey eyes of both her parents, and light brown hair she had gotten from her father. The little girl looked intently at him, but she didn't start to cry. He subconsciously rocked her in his arms to the rhythm of an old northern nursery rhyme that Alice had once taught him. Where is your boy? He asked her, without taking his eyes off the intently looking grey-blue eyes in his arms. His daughter turned around and pointed at a 3-year-old boy in indigo clothes, who tried to hide behind the leg of a knight wearing the same indigo colors on his tabard. Robert, come here. Come to Mama. She called out to him, but the boy seemed hesitant to comply and pulled himself even closer to the man next to him. The young knight coughed loudly in response. Princess Sarah, maybe we have broken enough protocol for today, he remarked, before looking at old Lord Jason Mallister. His former counselor smiled at the knight, before elaborately bowing towards him. The whole courtyard followed his lead. Seaguard is yours, your grace. The man voiced with a subtle smile on his lips that was aimed at his grandson's royal wife. I thank you, Lord Mallister. I have said it before, and I will say it again, you have a beautiful home. He responded regally. The old Riverlord nodded approvingly. Let me introduce you to my family, or those you haven't already met. He grinned, while looking at the Malister baby he was holding in his hands. He kept carrying the baby. He knew that it was not how a king was expected to behave in the south, but decorum be damned. This was his granddaughter, and he would keep holding her as long as she didn't cry. He walked over to Lord Jason, flanked by his daughter. His son, nephew, Wulfsguard and most important lords trailing behind him. This little boy here is Robert Malister. He is my only great-grandson, for now, and the proud future of my house. He was named after you, your grace. A Malister with royal blood and the most piercing grey eyes I have seen since the Mad King ended the life of your uncle Brandon prematurely. He looked at his young grandson. He indeed had piercing grey eyes. He crouched down towards the boy and ruffled his head, being careful not to drop his sister in the process. I am your grandfather, young Robert. He introduced himself. Mama told me that my Uthar grandfather is king. Are you a king? The boy asked him, while still trying to duck behind the knight's leg. He grinned, while throwing a look at his daughter. Aye lad, I am the king. The little boy seemed to accept this and loosened his grip on the leg that he had been holding, but still kept his distance. Lord Jason then introduced the knight to him. This is my second grandson Joseph. He is staying here to help me rule and protect the family, while his elder and younger brothers accompanied Patrick to Riverrun. Well met, Sir Joseph. He greeted the young Malister knight. I hope that one day you and my son can have a bond as good as I have with your father and grandfather. House Malister is one of the most important houses in the Riverlands, a thing House Stark will never forget. The Riverlander nodded appreciatingly. It would an honor to spend time with the prince, your grace. He was then introduced to the Seaguard household, before joining Lord Jason in his solar. They talked about the greater aspects of the war, as well as the local situation around Seaguard. It seemed that zealous groups in the area had waited until Patrick had led the forces of House Malister to Riverrun before rising up against them. Lord Jason had excused himself for not joining the war effort himself, but he had waved it away. The Lord of Seaguard was 73 years old and had served him loyally for the last 29 years. He didn't take offense of it in the slightest. They talked about the damage those fanatics were inflicting and how best to deal with them. Less than 2 hours after entering the solar, he had dispatched 4 groups of light cavalry to take care of them. The command of those were given to some of the young sons of his vassals. Each had command over a group of 100 mounted men, while he prepared to march on to Raventree Hall with the bulk of his troops. The commands fell to Rukon Carstark, Bim Flint, Gia Mormont and Sir Ella Maras. It was a way to make them feel important and respected, while also looking to see who amongst the next generation had a gift for command that he could use later in the war. A few days later, he studied the old mossy walls of Raventree Hall with approval. They were ancient, kept in good condition and lined with strong square towers. In front of them was a moat lined with stones for extra protection. Outside of it stood tents, betraying the presence of a force of many hundreds of men. At the same time, the walls looked packed with even more soldiers. He was greeted kindly by some lower nobles sworn to House Blackwood, before Sir Edmund Blackwood rode towards them from the keep to greet him. The younger brother of Lords Bryndon Blackwood and Lucas Goodwood led him inside the walls, after ordering the lower nobles to help his Northmen to set up camp in the rich Blackwood Vale. The valley was much the same as it always had been, still no trees grew here. The Blackwoods had been one of the main importers of northern wood because of this, and shipments were regularly delivered to Seaguard from Barrowton, Sea Dragon Point or Bear Island. Since the marriage of Lysara Carstark to Lord Bryndon's heir Titos, shipments coming from Carhold also travelled up the Red Fork from Maidenpool. In turn, the Blackwoods traded grains, dried fruits and salted meats with their northern trading partners, as well as honey. This arrangement was something which had been very beneficial for both parties. The economic growth of the Blackwood lands had led to a population boom comparable to the north, and the lands he had passed had seemed to be flourishing before the war. However, now villages and towns were being walled, as lone farmsteads and unprotected hamlets were burned down by fanatics crossing their border from the rest of the Riverlands. They passed many of those ruins on their way south, often the decomposing bodies were still scattered across them. Wherever he could, he made sure that his men buried the poor sods. While traveling here from Seaguard, He had also seen dozens of the culprits hanging from trees with warnings placed next to their bodies, but the fanatics seemed to keep coming. Patrols of dozens of soldiers each toured the lands, as they tried to keep as much of their people safe. Those living on the outer borders had long fled to the Blackwood Vale, which was crowded with refugees. It was a horrible sight and one he wished to rectify soon. Sir Edmund Blackwood brought him and his most important lords to the Great Hall, where he was greeted by more Blackwoods. Lord Brindon had taken his heir Titos with him to Riverrun, but his two remaining sons remained in Raventree. Sir Robert and his younger brother Sir Jarmos greeted him with great hospitality, as he and all his companions were not only given bread and salt, but wine, cheeses and meats as well. For his nephew Bryn and his two Blackwood companions, Sirs Benedict and Alyn, it was a joyful reunion with their kin. He thanked the young knights for their hospitality, and they quickly told him more of the situation in the Riverlands. Father and Titos left with 1,200 men to aid Lord Hoster. We, together with Uncle Edmund, were tasked to remain here to protect our lands. Lord Brindon's second son explained to him. He frowned. Only 1,200. House Blackwood should be able to raise 3,000 men. No wonder Lord Tully could only raise 8,000 troops. We can raise even more than 3,000, especially since the population growth of the last 25 years. However, the dangers around us are too great to empty our lands. We cannot risk sending more. Sir Robert responded. Tell me more about what happened here. He asked the 20-something-year-old knight. Dozens of incursions of Zealot 7 believers have already happened onto our lands. Sometimes, they are organized. Led by a landed knight and a corps of his soldiers with well-armed small folk to swell their numbers. Other times, it is 24 peasants armed with clubs and shovels under the leadership of some fanatic septon. Blackwood started. On top of that, we need to keep an eye on House Bracken. Lord John O's has gathered his forces at Stonehenge, but he refuses to move. Father thinks he might be eyeing up our lands and is waiting for us to be vulnerable before he strikes. His much younger brother Sir Jarmos added. The Brackens remain at Stonehenge. We received conflicting reports about their loyalties in this war. His son John asked the Blackwoods. Understandably so, as they not united. Sir Robert scoffed. Lord John O's, his heir Sir Henry and Henry's 3 eldest sons remain in Stonehenge with the vast majority of their forces. However, Lord John O's youngest grandson Lucas Bracken has supposedly broken with his grandfather and rallied hundreds of Bracken men for Elmar's cause. John O's and Henry Bracken remain neutral, but the fourth son rallied men against their orders and joined Sir Elmar. He asked, to which all 3 Blackwoods nodded. That is the story they tell us, at least. Sir Edmund added, as he stood side by side with his nephews. Young Lucas was always the closest with his cousin Elmar, whilst his elder brothers gravitated more to Oscar Tully. This resembled their age differences as well. House Bracken has joined the latter's faction. More than likely, they are hoping that the eldest and youngest Tully destroy each other. After that, they will strike. Sir Robert told them. Brackens are always problems. Jarmos spat. It seemed that not only the Tully family was split, but that many other families were divided as well, with the younger sons joining the rebels if their fathers or grandfathers remained neutral. The Mallisters had told him of similar things happening in houses Shawnee and Grill. Aren't Elmar and the Brackens your cousins too? He asked, curious to how the feud could have reappeared so strongly only 25 years after his marriage policy had tried to bury it once and for all. Sir Robert shook his head. Only mine, not Jarmos here. My elder brother Titos, mother was Caitlin Bracken. However, she and her baby girl died together in childbirth when I was 3 years old. Father remarried to the younger sister of Lord Biglestone 2 years later, which resulted in Jarmos and my 2 younger sisters. He explained, while pointing to his younger half-brother. He nodded, remembering the news of Lady Blackwood's death now. The Brackens and Tullys, as well as the D'Ares and Leicesters, are my maternal kin. However, this has never been clear during my upbringing. Lord Hoster and my elder brother Titos value the connection and have always been close, but the Brackens have never cared for rapprochement with us. I am fairly close to my D'Are cousins, but maybe that is only because their Bracken mother also died when they were young. The knight shrugged. I care much more for my paternal family. He shrugged, as he nodded towards Bryn and the Blackwoods who had accompanied the boy from the north. He smiled at the gesture, as it seemed clear that the boy's focus was on the north, a useful thing to have within what was probably the strongest house of the Riverlands now. How many men remain here? Have you had any substantial losses? He asked them. Sir Edmund Blackwood nodded. In the beginning of the war, some of the vassals on our borders were overwhelmed. At least 200 soldiers and 10,000 small folk were lost in this manner. Since then, another 100 fighting men were lost in clashes that occurred with our patrols. I myself fought in more than a few of them. Small folk casualties have dropped, but they remain a constant occurrence. Nonetheless, over 40,000 refugees reside in Blackwood Vale now. What was the population of the Blackwood lands before the incursions? He asked the elder Blackwood. Around 400,000, give or take. Sir Edmund started. Our lands were spared the destruction most of the Riverlands faced 30 years ago. Since then, our population has grown considerably. Thousands of our subjects have left over the years to settle my brother's lands, those formerly belonging to House Goodbrook. Others have settled the rich farmlands of Rosby, Riverport or Hayford. 500 even followed my younger brother Alan to his lands around Moat Cailin. Over the years, at least 30,000 left our lands. This is one of the main reasons the Septons call for our destruction. The vast majority of our subjects believe in the old gods, and they feel that we are colonizing the rest of the Riverlands. Ha, wouldn't that be an idea? Lord Ironsmith remarked from behind him. He shot him an angry look. Comments like that could only fuel the religious fires burning against them. How many people have you lost by now? He asked. Sir Robert answered. Some 20,000 in total, but more will be lost before this war ends. Soldiers will fall in the fighting, while incursions continue from all sides, especially from the Bracken lands. Well, incursions will lessen from the north. My men are taking care of the Warbans scouring the Mallister lands, especially those along the Blue Fork in the lands which formerly belonged to House Free. How can we help you here? He brought up. Sir Edmund scratched his beard. Most of the small unorganized enemy groups are destroyed, whilst the larger better organized ones often flee to our neighbors' lands. I have pursued and destroyed 2 of them on the lands of House Peage recently. Others have been pursued to the north and southwest as well. They seem to realize this. Most attacks now seem to be coming from the mountains in the west or the Bracken lands. We don't dare to pursue them there, out of fear of provoking Lord John O's into open conflict. He nodded. I understand. A letter will be sent to House Bracken. Northern riders will cross their borders to hunt down fanatics and bandits. Any hindrance will be seen as support for the rebellion and will result in an attack on Stonehenge. Elmar is stuck in Stony September and Lord John O's lacks enough allies in the area to resist. He will either back down or face destruction. This was met with smiles by the Blackwoods, who all proclaimed their support for him. 6 groups of cavalry will be dispatched to all corners of the Blackwood lands. All have permission to cross into the lands of other lords, as long as they remain in the kingdom of the Riverlands. He proclaimed. 1 group will march north towards the northeast under the command of Sir Winfrey. He voiced, as he looked at Oliver's eldest son. 1 will go east as far as Fairmarket under Donald Slate. 2 will go against the mountains in the west under Darren Hornwood and Benjamin Riswell. I think both will do well in forested hills. They are used to it at home. Both of their fathers looked at him and nodded in agreement. The last 2 will go southeast under Benfred Tallheart and Meagher Sawin. They can pursue them as far as Stonehenge. However, they cannot engage the Brackens in any way. If they are attacked, they pull back and regroup with the main force before we strike back in unison. He had chosen the boys with care. Meagher was Uriah's son, and he knew him to be capable. Benfred Tallheart was a frequent visitor of Winterfell. He also seemed to show promise. All groups will consist of 100 Northmen of their houses, complemented with some men and guides from House Blackwood. By now the Blackwoods were all grinning. However, in return I would ask some of the Blackwood Levi to accompany us to Riverrun. Leaving 2,000 men here with Riverrun under threat is asking for problems. The 2 younger knights shuffled awkwardly after hearing that. He understood, as the orders to remain here had come directly from their lordly father. Luckily, After a few seconds Sir Edmund spoke up. "I will join you with 600 of our men, your grace." His nephews looked at him in shock. "You were appointed Castellan, uncle." They confronted him. Sir Edmund dismissed the concerns. "Jamos, you can help one of the northern groups in the west. Robert, you can do the same or you can stay here. I would appoint you Castellan, together with cousin Mathis. You are my brother's son, whilst Mathis holds the years and experience you yet lack. I only take 600 men with me. The others remain here. You heard the king. If the Brackens strike, he will annihilate them anyway." Both boys relented and Sir Edmund asked him for leave to prepare the men. He granted that, and the knight bowed before leaving the great hall with long confident strides. House Blackwood remained as interesting as it had ever been. Lords Titos and Brindon had built up quite a family. He hoped they would fight as well as they were large. 3 days later, he felt relieved when he saw the red sandstone walls of Riverrun looming up in the distance. Above it, the banner of House Tully waved proudly. Below it, a large army encampment could be seen sporting the banners of houses Blackwood, Goodwood, Mallister, Peach, Deddings and Biglestone, as well as scores of minor families sworn to them. 3 of the cavalry groups he had sent out around Seaguard had by now rejoined the main column, having adequately fulfilled their jobs and dispersed or destroyed the main rebel groups. On his orders, the bodies of the rebels they had killed or captured had been hung from trees like the Blackwoods had done. That should make others think twice before they took up arms against him. His new Blackwood companion Sir Edmund had proven to be as pleasant company as his brothers these past 2 days, which was how he found himself next to him as they rode towards the Tully army encampment. The knight also served to keep Bryn in check, as Bran's son looked up to his maternal uncle. Before reaching the entrance of the army encampment, they were greeted by a group of riverlords. Sir Halman Peach, Lord Brindon Blackwood and Sir Henry Deddings, and their retinues, came out to greet him. For the latter two, it was a kind but unexpected reunion with their family. All 3 nobles bowed down to him, before greeting the other lords who had ridden with him at the head of the army. Sir Henry embraced his father Lord Damewell, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. Lord Brindon greeted his nephew and namesake, while loudly shouting at his brother. "Edmund, what are you doing here? I left you to watch our home and protect it from bandits and Brackens." The knight from the Riverlands laughed loudly. "His Grace took care of most of those problems for us. As such, it looked opportune for me to gather another 600 men and join you here at Riverrun. Thought you could use the reinforcements." The Lord of Raventree Hall looked at him for confirmation and he nodded. "Only 600. No more. The lands are still safe?" he asked Sir Edmund. "Yes, brother, they are. Since you arranged for me to marry, I also have a family there to care for. I wouldn't leave them undefended." Apparently, that was enough for the older Blackwood, who then embraced Edmund, before having a joyful reunion with his other brother Alyn and his second cousin Sir Benedict of the Wolfsguard. After a few more greetings, Sir Halman Peach spoke up. "Lord Tully will want to see you immediately, your grace. A battle has been fought here recently and nothing pleases us more than your arrival. Lord Hoster will feel the same." "A battle? Here?" he asked, shocked by the news. "I thought the enemy was gathering at Stony Stept." "Yes, your grace." The Knight of Fairmarket responded. "The enemy sent their vanguard to push on to Riverrun under Lord Perrin. We speculate that this was done to tie us down here, while reinforcements keep pouring into Stony September. Our forces clashed 3 days ago." "What happened at the battle?" "Seeing that you all remain here, I expect that you won." The Riverlords looked at each other. "The result of the battle was undecisive, your grace." Sir Rob Peach, Sir Halman's heir and his cousin Minister Tully's husband, answered. Lord Blackwood nodded in agreement. "Lord Perrin approached us with 5,000 men. They consisted of Riverlander troops and Westerlander mercenaries, no zealous rabble. The banners of Houses Grill, Vance of Wayfarer's Rest and Bracken were found among them, although it clearly didn't consist of all of their troops. So, the Brackens, Grills and Vances all had breakaway factions that joined the rebels." He asked his vassals from the Riverlands. "Yes, your grace." Sir Henry Deddings replied. The lords of those houses remain neutral and have kept most of their strength home. However, younger sons, brothers and cousin have apparently managed to persuade some of their vassals to join the rebels anyway. The two younger brothers of Lord Grull were seen with Lord Perrin, similarly the youngest son of Lady Vance and the youngest grandson of Lord John Osbracken were there as well. He thought that over. That is good. It means we don't have to fight their full strength right now. We can deal with them after we have defeated the rebels. They have refused a summons from their liege lord and their king. This will have consequences. The Brackens could raise well over 2,500 men. House Grull and Vance of Wayfarers Rest together could raise another 1,500. If less than a quarter of them were in the field, he would see that as a victory. All river lords nodded in agreement. What were the losses on both sides during the engagement? He asked them. Sir Halman Page spoke up. They had around 600 losses, whilst ours numbered around 1,000. However, we managed to get them to leave the field. 2 days ago, they were reinforced with a detachment of troops from Stony September and they restarted their advance here yesterday. What stopped them this time? All river lords grinned. You did, your grace. The page told him. The news of your arrival has spread far and wide by your ravens and riders and their outriders must have seen your marching column. As they didn't have the numbers to engage you now, they packed up their camp in the middle of the night and have marched straight south towards Stony September. His mind immediately sprang into action. Can we catch them? Possibly, your grace, but only if you let the infantry here. However, I would advise against it. Too many houses in the area between here and Stony September remain neutral. Any one of those could charge you in the back, if you manage to force Lord Perrin to do battle. New reinforcements could also come from the Golden Tooth as well. It is too dangerous and if you were slain or captured, many of those still neutral houses will join against us. The Riverlands would be doomed. Bryndon Blackwood told him. He let that sink in. Very well. We will remain here. We will set up camp together next to your men. He then looked at the Knight of Fairmarket. Sir Halman, could you see to it that my men are shown the area where they need to set up camp? Sir Halman Page reacted immediately. Certainly, your grace. He turned his horse, waiting to guide most of his commanders towards the area. He looked at some of his companions and turned to those with experience. He told Harmond Umber, Lord Timothy Flint and Lady Daisy Mormont to divide up the camp and secure the outer perimeter. He especially looked towards his brother John. Set up camp for your men and those sworn to Winterfell. Afterwards, check the outer perimeter and make sure that it is secure. The enemy is near, I want no surprises. Afterwards, come to the castle. Rooms will be ready for you and your sons. It will be done, Rob. However, I know that Edric will want to stay with the men. He feels obligated to do so. His brother replied. John's eldest son was only 18 years old and took his duties as heir very seriously. During their march, he had asked him why he did that. The boy had responded that he was the first ever heir of House Whitefy and that he had to show the people and soldiers from Sea Dragon Point that he was one of theirs and cared for them. Very well, it is a commendable attitude. Give Edric command of your men in the camp, while you and Benjen come up to stay in the keep. John nodded in response, before turning his horse and trotting off together with both knights of House Page and almost the entire northern entourage. He himself rode on with Lord Blackwood, Lord Deddings, his son and nephew and his Wolfsguard. Once inside the castle, he was quickly greeted by his cousin Hoster. It is very good to see you, your grace. Riverrun is yours, as always. The Lord Paramount of the Riverlands called out with a bow, as a genuine smile crept up on his face. I can say the same, cousin. I will always appreciate the reflection of Riverrun's red sandstone walls in the Red Fork. He responded heartily. Hoster laughed cheekily. That is your mother's blood welcoming you home, your grace. He smiled. It might be. He then looked behind Uncle Edmure's oldest son. He saw two little girls with auburn hair there, who held on to the skirts of a pregnant woman. The woman itself he knew, but it still surprised him how much she looked like her father, Patrick Mallister. He walked over to her, and after she curtsied, he kissed her hand in the southern courtly manner. It is good to see you in such good health, Lady Tully. Thank you, Your Grace. May I present our family to you? She asked him, after making eye contact with her husband. Certainly, I have longed to meet the future of my mother's house. He smiled back, which pleased both her and Hoster. This is our oldest daughter, Lady Jane Tully. She was named after my own mother. After that, she turned towards her husband, who picked up their youngest daughter with a knowing smile. Hoster Tully took place next to his wife and picked up his second daughter. This is Caitlin, although we mostly call her Cat. She was named after your own mother. The name has multiple reasons. First and foremost, in recognition of what she did to make me feel at home during my time in Winterfell. Secondly, to credit all she did for my own father when he was young, and thirdly to honor House Tully's connection to House Stark. He looked at the young girl, who showed some superficial likeness to his mother with her Tully blue eyes and auburn hair. The girl seemed interested in him as well. "Granddaddy?" she asked. Her father smiled sadly at his daughter. "No, he is our king and cousin. Although he looks a lot like your late grandfather." The 2-year-old girl looked at him once more. "Fine?" she asked, and it made him laugh. I am your cousin. It is good to finally meet you. You look very pretty, Lady Caitlin." This made the girl smile, before she disappeared around the neck of her father. "May I reacquaint you with the rest of our kin?" he asked Hoster, who of course nodded. "You know my son John?" he told them, as his youngest son stepped forward. He greeted the Tullys kindly and they replied just as warmly. "And of course my nephew, Brynden Stark. Bran's son was named after the most illustrious knight and one of the best Riverlanders that I ever met." He introduced Bryn. The Tully couple smiled fondly, as they greeted him as one of theirs. Hoster had been taught for years by the Blackfish and it was clear that the name meant a lot to him. They also remembered his nephew well, from the years the boy had fostered in the Riverlands. They talked a little more, as John and Bryn acquainted themselves with the new Tully household. He conversed with Patrek Mallister, who had been in the castle to advise Hoster about the health of his father and grandchildren in Seaguard. After a while, he motioned to Lord Hoster that they should talk. A thing to which he quickly agreed. In the meantime, Lady Desmara would show John and Bryn their rooms and introduce them to the sons of the present Riverlander houses. He quickly followed Hoster to the Tully Solar. Once inside of it, he stood still for a moment. He looked around and soaked in all the memories the place held for him. Lord Hoster saw the look on his face and smiled sadly. "I suppose it holds bittersweet memories for you too?" He nodded. Many meetings with your father and Uncle Brynden. The earliest memories of this castle even include our grandfather, who was near death's door at the time. Still, he was a very interesting man. He was very grateful that we smashed the Kingslayer's army under his walls and indulged me with anything I asked for." The head of House Tully smiled. Your famous Battle of the Camps." He nodded, deep in thought. "Another battle was fought here, 3 days ago." Lord Tully commenced, but he waved it away. "I already know, Peach and Blackwood filled me in on all the important details." "That's good." Hoster smiled. "With that business out of the way, I only have good news to tell you." He cocked his eyebrow, curious to what his Riverlander cousin would tell him. "I received a letter yesterday evening from Sir Harry Mossbridge, my mother's half-brother." Hoster started. He remembered Sir Harry Rivers, a base-born son of Lord John Osbracken. He had been a companion of the Blackfish during the early war and had become a man of some renown in later campaigns. Afterwards, he had been awarded with lands where the Gold Road crossed over the Blackwater Rush. His lands were fertile, and a bustling town just shy of 10,000 people, recollected from King's Landing, lay under the sturdy stone keep that he had erected on the hill above. His new house had been named after the old stone bridge that brought the Gold Road over the Blackwater Rush. The town had aptly been named Blackwater's Crossing. Sir Harry's side of the bridge had been fortified, and he had visited his lands twice over the years to inspect the border with the Reach. The knight had done well with the lands. He had settled Crownlander refugees, spread Riverlander culture along the Blackwater Rush, fortified the area and built out a bustling town on the river that had facilitated trade from the southern and central Riverlands to Riverport and Blackwater Bay. However, that had all been heavily subsidized by royal funding throughout the years. His neutral stance during the conflict had angered him greatly, as well over 200,000 golden wolves had been poured into his lands through subsidies and loans over the last 25 years. Nevertheless, he had followed his father Lord Bracken in not picking sides between his Tully kin. "Please, tell me what Sir Harry has to tell," he spat, grinding his teeth. The anger about the betrayal once again rising up inside him. Hoster silently handed him a scroll. He rolled it open and read the words written in black ink. To Lord Hoster Tully. Hundreds of zealous reachmen tried to cross the Blackwater Rush today under the leadership of a Septon Osmond. Their group, mostly consisting of poorly armed peasants, stormed the bridge and crossed the river on boats. I defeated their forces, killing over half and pushing the rest back to the other side of the river. Septon Osmond's head now adorns the moss bridge. These zealots are dangerous and out of control. Your younger brother created a problem, which he cannot come back from by inciting and legitimizing the carnage they try to inflict on innocent small folk. I cannot, and will not, stand for this. I hereby confirm the oaths I swore to you, Lord Hoster Tully, as my liege lord, and to his grace King Rob of House Starks. I deeply apologize for my tardiness, but hope this letter finds you both well. I will protect the crossing from the Reach, as well as the western side of Riverport from any danger from zealots or rebels alike until further notice. After securing the crossing, I can raise another 300 men that I can march anywhere upon your orders. Your loyal vassal, Sir Harry Mossbridge, Knight of Mossy Crossing. He looked to Lord Tully and scoffed. At last, he comes around. His cousins cocked his eyebrow. I thought you would be pleased. Except for the fact where he says he can only bring 300 men. That seems awfully low to me. He shook his head. That is actually fairly believable. Really. His town has almost 10,000 people. He should be able to rally much more. His warden of the Riverlands countered. It is true that the town of Blackwater Crossing has almost 10,000 people, but his other lands hardly have 4 times that amount of people and not the usual 12 times. He imports most of the food needed to sustain the town from the southern and central riverlands, and with river barges even from Essos by way of Riverport. He doesn't have the rural population we mostly associate with such settlements. He replied. Nevertheless, 300 men. The golden rule my father always told me is that a lord can usually rally around 1% of his people. For Mossbridge that should be 500 men. However, the town and the fact that many of his people consist of veterans from the former war, and their families, changes things. He can probably raise 700 or 800 men, but 100 of those will be the town guard. He will need to keep another 300 men home to protect the bridge and the keep and will have incurred some losses during the skirmish. Lord Hoster listened intently, before eventually nodding. Very well, the 300 seems fair. However, I thought that you would be happy with the news. Sir Harry is a son of Lord Bracken. It was expected that they would all side with my brothers. He scratched his beard. Aye, that's true. However, the Crown has spent hundreds of thousands of golden coins to subsidize his rise to power. I had expected him to join us at the start just for that. Nonetheless, it is indeed good news, I guess. I will answer his letter personally and order him to join Lord Sumber in Riverport with his men. Lord Sumber can use the reinforcements to help protect his lands from the fanatics in his area. Lord Tully nodded pensively. That might be the best use for him. It should also help with the isolation that the lords of Blackwater Bay are now feeling. I have received multiple ravens asking for help from them, especially now after their defeat at Southhorn, but there is nothing I can do for now. Yes, the defeat at Southhorn. When they had received the news at Raventree, it had sent shockwaves through his army. Southhorn had been gifted to John Slate after the wars, a beloved cousin of the new Lord Slate. Sir John Slate had become the North's voice in Hayford until Martin Castle came of age as Lord Hayford. Afterwards, he became his main advisor. When word had come that his keep was being besieged by a large group of fanatics and lower nobles, Alaric and Martin had marched on it with all the troops of houses Rosby and Hayford. When they arrived, Lord Rollingford had sprung his trap. Alaric, Martin and their 1,500 soldiers had found themselves surrounded by 3 times their number, as apparently Lord Rollingford had gotten reinforcements from Stony September. The resulting battle had been a disaster. His wife's cousin had been killed together with much of his force. To make matters worse, he hadn't been the only important casualty. Alaric Zaire had been slain, as well as most of the landholders of northern descent in the Rossby and Hayford lands. This included 2 other cousins of his wife and some of their sons. Martin Castle had narrowly escaped to Hayford together with Alaric's second son and some 50 riders. The rest of the army had been destroyed or scattered. The entire lower nobility was decimated. To twist the knife in the wound, it hadn't stopped there. Afterwards, the enemy forces had stormed Southhorn. They had sacked the keep. In the process, they had killed John Slate and brutalized his family. His wife and daughters had been raped, before the whole family had been hung from their own walls. 7 of his 8 children had found their end there with him. Only his 3rd son had been saved through sheer luck, as he was serving Lady Hayford as a page and wasn't in his home. Afterwards, the enemy army had attacked every village or farmhouse known to house Northerners or Old Gods believers in the area. 8,000 people had been raped, murdered and tortured in the span of a few days. News still trickled in about the size of the slaughter. Many knightly families of northern descent were exterminated in the male line in that battle, whilst others were reduced to child rulers. On the Hayford lands 1 in 3 northern families, peasant and noble alike, were ended, with both males and females butchered in the wake of the battle. His army was furious, and it hungered for revenge. The massive killing of children was not something they ever condoned, and it had caused a moral shock among his forces. On top of that, there were also the personal aspects. Those northern knightly families almost all descended from the great northern families or their vassals. The Carstarks, Sewins, Slates, Dustins, Riswells, Flints and Woolfields had lost family members. 24 lower northern families had also lost kin. After this, the mood among his men had changed. Suddenly, almost all his men had started calling this the war to ensure the existence of their religion and people south of the Neck. Not only his northerners, but also the Blackwoods and all other native Old Gods believing Riverlanders, were saying this. Some were openly calling for him to march on Old Town and destroy the Starry September to end the organized religion of the Seven. He had been forced to stay in Raventree for another day to calm his men. Most of the troops here in Riverrun believed in the Seven. He could not have arrived there with his men shouting that they wanted to drink the blood of every septon in the vicinity. In the end, he had managed to calm them by promising them the heads of Lord Rollingford and all the other leaders of the enemy force at Southhorn, which were a mercenary leader and 2 of the most devout who had commanded contingents of the faith militant. He had also promised them that he would demand the head of the High Septon when the war was over. Nevertheless, his commanders had forced him to call upon thousands of new soldiers from the north to strengthen their position. Ravens had flown and soon the north would once again begin to muster. He especially looked upon the most remote houses like the Umbers, Carstarks and Mormonts for these troops. Yet, all houses would be asked for additional forces. Even the mountain clans and the Scaddarsea were ordered to rally. In total, another 18 to 20,000 soldiers could be expected to arrive in 3 months' time. That is why it fell so heavy for him to agree with Hoster's assessment that they couldn't send additional help to Blackwater Bay. He sighed. They are on their own for now. However, I have sent Ricard to deal with House Lolliston and my brother Rukan to help Lords Mutan and Dare to finish off House Terrick. That will help somewhat with the situation over there. From Raventree Hall, I have written to both of them to eradicate as many of the enemy bands in the area as they can. There is not much more that I can do for now. I thought something like that might be the case. How many men did you arrive with? Lord Tully asked. Just over 10,000. Rukan has 2,000 with him and Ricard has 4,000. Lord Hornwood remains with another 2,000 at the Twins. He replied. Is that smart? To divide your forces like that? If Elmar marches on Riverrun, he will outnumber us. Hoster countered. He would. However, a large part of his force consists of armed peasants, while the others are scattered groups of Westerlanders, Reachmen, Rivermen and mercenaries. He will have to spend a lot of time hammering it into a unified army, or risk total collapse in the moment of truth. Besides that, he seems to have sent at least 1,500 men to Lord Rollingford. He pointed out. Cooler heads like Lords Piper and Footley will rightly advise him to wait, train and regroup. If they don't and they march anyway, our scouts will see them and we either dig in here or we pull back to Fairmarket or Raventree and regroup there. We can easily push them back together from there. You would leave Riverrun to the enemy? His cousin asked dismayed. He waved the concern away. Of course not, a very sizable garrison would be installed that Elmar couldn't hope to storm. It would consist partly of northern troops to make sure people don't turn their cloaks and surrender the keep. However, this is a last resort. It all depends on the scout reports and when my brother and son will return with their troops and the Eastern River Lords. This calmed his cousin down considerably. They talked some more about how the rebellion of Elmar had come to be. How all of them had focused on Oscar and forgotten about Elmar. They also talked about the Reach houses and their vindictiveness after losing much of their lands 25 years ago. It seemed that the next generation of the claimants had all gathered together in Highgarden and Tumbleton, waiting for their moment to strike. A moment that had now come because of Elmar's stupidity. He had also gotten some new information. Apparently, Elmar had married Lord Footley's eldest daughter Eleanor in order to gather this support. The girl was calling herself the Queen of Rivers and Hills and was traveling with her father and brother in the army. The hand of Highgarden could clearly be seen in all of this, although they had schemed well enough to be able to wash their hands off it later. Where is your mother in all of this? I had expected her to be in the courtyard when I arrived. He finally asked. A hurt look passed over Hoster Tully's face. She has confined herself to her rooms. He raised both his eyebrows. Even if it means refusing her king. Hoster nodded. Yes, apparently so. She hates me for marrying Celia off to Lord Roger's Edmund. She would probably run to Elmar if she could. I don't know how she doesn't understand that I needed allies close to Riverrun. If my brothers were to try anything, I needed forces that could muster quickly. Lord Roger was an ideal candidate and he proved himself loyal. However, both he and Edmund have died under the walls of Stony September. His cousin sighed. I tried to do everything right. I don't know what went wrong. I married into House Mallister to secure the northern Riverlands and get an important, well-respected ally and a large dowry. To further secure the northern areas, my sister married into House Peage and I kept myself on friendly terms with Houses Free and Blackwood. His cousin sighed. I secured further support around Riverrun and in the central Riverlands through Celia's marriage to House Roger and by keeping good relations with House Goodwood. He started pacing around the room. I gave modest boons to Maidenpool and Duskendale to keep the Rykers and Mutongs firmly in my camp, hoping to secure the eastern trade. All the while, you helped secure the eastern Riverlands with the betrothals of Bran's daughters to Houses Deari and Mutan. I even held the Gold Road houses in the palm of my hands. I tried to get the Vances of Atranta on my side, and apparently, I had some success as none of their troops joined my brother, but it still seems like I failed as Lord. I tried so hard, yet I failed and now the Riverlands are set aflame by zealots and rebellious lords everywhere. My allies are dying all around me and I can't even win against my brother's vanguard when it marches against my home. He silently listened to Uncle Edmure's eldest son. He understood where the young man was coming from and he had to admit that he had tried hard, with good pre-war results. He simply had too much going against him. He put a hand on the shoulder of the, on paper, second most powerful man in his kingdom. Look, you aren't entirely to blame. It was my order that had you focus on Oscar, and I failed to watch Elmar sufficiently. Besides, you managed to keep the majority of the Riverlands away from your brothers. The support Elmar received from noble houses in the Riverlands is but a fraction of his troops. His only big ally is House Piper, and that was because of a decision of your father and me which made him foster there. Without the support of the Starry September and the houses in the Reach and Westerlands, this would be an easy rebellion for you to quell even without my help. That vanguard included battle-hardened Westerlander mercenaries and your efforts to muster your troops were disrupted by all the zealots. None of that is your fault. Hoster looked up at him in thanks. Ever since he had fostered in Winterfell as a boy with his son, he had forced himself to have a good relationship with the eldest Tully. He knew that Hoster looked up to him and that he would be able to count on him. In turn, The young lord could always expect his aid in return. He looked him calmly into his deep blue Tully eyes. The only worldly figures that you need to be accountable to are the two men in this room. The only opinion that matters is your own and mine. To me, you have not failed. The Riverlands have always been fractured from within, and you did a recommendable job to try and keep it together. You couldn't possibly fight against the influence of the Starry September, especially with the rebels finding foreign aid on your southern and western borders. That is where I come in, and I am here. Together we will rid the Riverlands of these religious fanatics and opportunistic rebels. This rebellion can even be a boon in the long term. He added. How so, Your Grace? The Lord of Riverrun asked him. The infighting between Oscar and Elmar has split the rebellious factions. The Brackens, both Vances, the Leicesters, even the troops from Harrenhal aren't committed against you. It could be that this rebellion fired prematurely, as they didn't sufficiently win over the support of those houses. He explained. We can use this rebellion to stamp out all organized resistance against either mine or your rule bit by bit. First, we tackle those who support Elmar and diminish the power the Starry September has over the Riverlands. Afterwards, the others fall in line, or they face the consequences. By the end of this, parts of the Riverlands will have burned, yes, but the remainder will be loyal, you can be assured of that. He continued determinedly. His young cousin seemed to be shocked by the harshness of his tone, but seemed to agree either way. How will you deal with those groups? I am still thinking of a plan on how to deal with the Starry September. Its reach in the Riverlands is way too large. It called for a holy war against all Old Gods believers, yet of the 70,007 believers in and around White Harbor only 24 heeded its call. Their heads now simply adorn its gates like those of ordinary brigands. He explained. In the Riverlands, it is completely different. Their influence is far greater. Tens of thousands heeded its call. Around 15,000 men rose up themselves, but behind those are tens of thousands of others who support them. Women and elderly, farmers and traders, all feed and clothe the fighters so they can continue this insane uprising. Those numbers don't even include those that joined the Stars and Swords or the zealous knights who joined Elmar with their retinues. The power of the Starry September needs to be reduced, if not broken, if houses Tully or Stark ever want to keep a decent hold over the lands. Certainly in the Riverlands, maybe even in the surrounding countries. Hoster listened attentively to him. The others are easier to deal with. All rebel lordly houses will be reduced in size. They will lose most of their lands, titles, wealth and prestige. Their sons will serve as hostages among loyal vassals. This will serve as a warning to others and greatly diminish their strength to make sure they can't do anything like this again. Knightly houses will face the same fate or will even be completely uprooted. There are too many who joined Elmar against their lord's wishes. Too many knights sworn to the Rospice, Hayfords, Goodwoods, Parrels and Mennings and others took up arms against their liege lords. Getting rid of them will strengthen our loyal vassals, lower the risk of this happening ever again and offer us opportunities to reward loyal subjects after the war. Younger members of loyal families and exceptional warriors could then be granted lands for their service. No matter how big or small their noble family, all heads of the families that rose against me will be executed or sent to the wall, without exceptions. Traitors can beg me for mercy for their families, but for themselves it is far too late. He ended resolutely. There would be no mercy for those that hunted believers of the old gods as a sport. That is very harsh. The head of House Tully remarked, although it didn't seem like he disagreed. They revolted against me to crown another king. They slaughtered tens of thousands of citizens under the pretext of their ancestry or religion on the orders of a foreign entity. This will not stand, and they will remember it for generations to come. You can be sure of that. He almost growled. The whole idea of it made him angry to his core. What will you do about those houses that remained neutral? Uncle Edmure's oldest son asked him. He sighed. That is more difficult. I can't simply take away half their lands, as they are too many and too important for the region. It would destabilize the region for decades and brand me a tyrant in the eyes of much of the Riverlands. However, by refusing to heed my summons, they have committed treason, albeit to a lesser degree. They will have to face consequences for that. Hoster seemed to agree with that. Nevertheless, it could pose one big problem. He himself added. That being. The Lord of Riverrun asked him. If the Tyrells or Lannisters rally against us, I will need the troops of those neutral houses even with the northern reinforcements. Nevertheless, they will need to face some punishments. In any case, I would prepare for children to get fostered at Riverrun with your daughters. Many houses will need to send their sons and daughters to Riverrun, Winterfell and other loyal houses in the north and Riverlands. I will not suffer another rebellion like this. In the end, Hoster easily agreed. His cousin even seemed to look forward to the moment when his rule would be unchallenged. He understood that. He looked forward to the moment when the Riverlands were calm and obedient as well. Chapter 85, The Heir Proves His Mettle. 28f. Ricard. He had left the twins 3 weeks ago together with his uncle Rickon and 6,000 men. They had marched in unison southwards along the King's Road, until Rickon had broken ranks and marched his 2,000 men towards Falconry Tower. On their way south together, they had encountered a few groups of fanatics that had been ravaging the countryside between the Green Fork and the mountains. On his uncle's advice, he had dispatched groups of light cavalry to deal with them. This had the benefit that his march south would not be delayed. The commands of those groups were given to the heirs of the present nobles. This would bring him the appreciation of the new generation, as well as more veteran commanders in the future. Apparently, it was a thing frequently done amongst new commanders in the free companies in Essos. He had sent out 3 bands of riders when they had marched together. One under the command of his cousin Baltasar Bolton, the 2 others under Andrew Locke and Donal Flint. After their split, 3 more groups had been sent out under Osric and Mors Umber and Muiron Reed. When his father had sent him south, he had expected many of the surrounding river lords to join him. Nonetheless, this didn't happen. Houses Cox, Leicester, Root and Shawnee all refused to respond to his summons, as they kept their forces behind their own walls and their gates closed. Some of these could be explained. Houses Shawnee and Cox had notable marriage connections to House Lolliston, whilst Lady Leicester was a Bracken. Nonetheless, it was shameful. The worst of them were House Root, who had been handsomely rewarded after the war by his father with the establishment of a second branch of the family in Rook's Rest under the name House Rook. Now, it seemed both branches refused to join either side. When he had studied the present situation of those houses, he understood it better. Many of their sworn knightly vassals or even family members had openly called to join the rebels. They faced zealous pillagers on the outside of their borders and rebels inside of them. For many, remaining neutral was an attempt at trying to evade possible carnage on their own lands. Lord Shawnee's 3rd son had even rebelled against his own father and taken 300 disgruntled soldiers of his father's lands with him to join Elmar at Stony September. Nevertheless, he had found some allies. He had spent a week clearing zealous groups away from the lands of Houses Deary and Greensnake, both of which had thanked him profusely for his help. In Frog's Knot, the keep of House Greensnake, he had been hosted warmly. Lord Robert Greensnake's heir, Sir Damon had entertained him for multiple days, after he had hung all the zealots he could find on and around the lands formerly belonging to House Vipren. A house he had only heard of in stories, as his father had destroyed it almost completely. Its only remaining member, Lady Greensnake, reduced to a way to legitimize House Greensnake's rule over the area. In the end, Sir Damon had personally joined him with 200 of his house's men and together they had continued southwest towards Lolliston Grove. His stay in Castle Deary had been equally pleasant. The keep was temporarily in the control of Lord Leman's 2nd son Sir Jonat Hoare Deary. Both he and his stepmother, Lady Deary, had been excellent hosts. After clearing away the bandits and fanatics from his land, Sir Jonat Hoare had raised another 300 men to join him under the command of his father's bastard cousin Sir Roland Rivers. He noticed that the longer they travelled, the more the local small folk seemed to fear his coming. Stories travelled quickly and his treatment of the zealots had been brutal, and rightfully so. His father had asked him to make a showing of it, so tales would spread. He had done just that. Any fanatic captured, dead or alive, had been hung from the branches of the closest tree with his belly cut open and his entrails hanging out of him. Sometimes their families travelled with them, and they suffered similar fates. The women he gave to his men, before hanging them next to their husbands. Their children were sent to the twins, to be escorted towards the wall or the Silent Sisters. Most peasants shut themselves up inside their houses out of fear when he passed their villages or homesteads. Nonetheless, they had nothing to fear of him. To better his reputation, he handed out parts of his supplies in every village. He had even held court in 2 of the bigger ones. 3 other villages he had helped repair after zealots had passed through it. This seemed to have adjusted his reputation somewhat. Brutal for his enemies, kind for those who remained loyal or kept to their own. It was a reputation he could live with. After only a week, the populations of the Dare and Greensnake lands lauded him as he passed by. Nevertheless, those in the lands of House Lolliston had anxiously hidden away from him. They had doubted on what to do. When his father had given him his orders, he had expected for at least 1,500 extra Riverlanders to join him. A thing which hadn't materialized. He had to make a choice. March on Lolliston Grove anyway, or back off and wait to get more reinforcements after his uncle Rukon took Falconry Tower. He had chosen the former. His men were angry and ready. On their way south, they had passed several weirwood trees that had been cut down. His army had called for vengeance then, a call which had amplified 1,000-fold after hearing about the slaughter of Sow's Horn. Their thirst for blood was great, and so was his. They would all pay for this. When he was finished with the Lollistons and other like them, no one would dare to destroy their holy places or hunt his fellow countrymen ever again. With 4,500 men, he had set out for Lolliston Grove. There had been one major problem. Harrenhal was only 1 day marching away from Lolliston Grove, and if Oscar Tully attacked him in the back, it could be a disaster. For now, all their spies told them that the second-born son of Edmure Tully was stubbornly locking himself in his giant fortress. He refused to join any of his brothers in their civil war. He wouldn't take anything for granted though, and as such he had sent Muiron Reed south towards Harrenhal to keep an eye on the Tully and his troops. If Oscar were to march out, Reed had strict orders to delay his coming by any means necessary and to kill as many of his men as he could while doing so. Muiron Reed had been an enigma to him. The Cranogman looked almost like a child and behaved and clothed himself very oddly. Nevertheless, he was the heir to one of the main noble houses of the north. His father had urged him to give the young man a chance, reminding him of the fact that Muiron's grandfather had not only saved his own grandfather's life during Robert's rebellion but also the fact that Lord Howland had served during his father's wars in the south. Apparently, he had also helped his uncle John a lot, both by initially telling him of his parentage and later by giving him advice throughout the years. Based on all of this, he had chosen to give the young Reed a chance. Since then, Muiron had positively surprised him. He had been a real asset in tracking zealous groups and wasn't bad at dealing with them either. In a mysterious way, he seemed wise beyond his years. For some reason, he trusted the 21-year-old to fulfill the important job at Harrenhal. His Umber father-in-law had had his doubts and had pressed upon him the importance of the mission. If Oscar broke out of Harrenhal in time, they could be annihilated. Nevertheless, he knew Muiron wouldn't fail. Suddenly, Lord Domeric brought him back to reality. "My prince, we are here. Our scouts tell us that from on top of this hill, we will be able to see Lolliston Grove." The Lord of the Dread Fort told him, while pointing at the hill they were slowly climbing with their horses. "Thank you, Lord Bolton." He didn't have to ask if it was safe. He pulled at a string at the back of his head, like his father had taught him to do in secret for over a decade. He smelled the air through his direwolf's superior nose, while listening for any dangers. There was no one waiting for them behind that hill. He softly put his spurs in the flanks of his horse and cantered away from the main line. His 2 Kingsguard members immediately followed him. Sir Dickon Brune, his trusted companion since his early childhood, caught up to him on his left. Cedric Sewin rode behind him with their mutual cousin Edarian. His father had arranged for his Aunt Arya's second son to serve as his squire during the war. Rion's older brother and father had gone to Riverrun, whilst he remained with him as a squire. He was a willful lad, much like his mother. Nonetheless, he was dutiful and loyal to the bone. Things that he could appreciate. When the boy came of age, he would offer him a position at Winterfell because of those traits. Father would never object, and the boy had potential. Lord Bolton loudly objected his movements behind him, but he simply ignored him. Soon, The lord of the dread fort caught up to him on his right, while his direwolf Ash sped up in front of them. Together they reached the top of the large hill, and there he held his reins. They looked over a few fertile valleys between some hills. On a small elevation in the largest of the valleys, Lolliston Grove could be seen. It was a small castle. It had somewhat of an oval shape. Furthest from him was the keep, which also served as the back of the outer wall. A stone curtain wall racked in front of it with two small rectangular stone towers on each side. In the front, a much stronger and larger tower stood facing the southeast. It was also rectangular, and the gate passed through its base. It was a simple, but very effective design. Any force trying to break down the gate would be pelted with missiles by the defenders from all floors of the tower. To the east of the castle, between it and some woodlands, an army encampment could be seen. Well, an army encampment was somewhat of an exaggeration. In the center and closest to the castle, orderly rows of tents could be seen. However, all around those tents were scattered around far and wide, betraying an undisciplined and unruly force. Nevertheless, the encampment seemed empty. This was no surprise. In between the hill from which he was looking down and the keep, two other large and flat hills could be seen. The enemy, clearly informed of their coming, had formed up there. Its elite organized force stood between those hills. Large unorganized bands of rabble stood on the flanks of the hills on each side, with groups of archers behind them on the highest ground. Two small groups of cavalry on both flanks finished their position. Lord Domeric took a deep breath, while analyzing the situation below. After a while, he turned his head towards him. "Why did you do that? There could have easily been a last-minute enemy ambush over the top of the hill. If anything were to happen to you, it could alter the entire war. Don't be so reckless, Prince Ricard." His aunt's husband scolded him. He waved away the concern. "I knew it was safe. Ash went ahead and he could have sniffed out enemies twice the distance we covered." The head of House Bolton frowned deeply, while looking between him and his companion. It was clear that the intelligent lord of the dread fort was putting some things together in his head, but he kept silent. His wife, Aunt Sansa, was bonded to a direwolf. He probably knew more than he let on. "What do you think of the enemy position?" he instead asked him. Lord Bolton scanned the area once more. "They hold a strong position. If we attack head-on, their spearline and men-at-arms will hold us off while their archers pelt us from on top of those hills. They could even follow this up with downward charges against our flanks. A frontal assault would be messy." He agreed. "Nevertheless, it might be our best option at first glance. If we attack their flanks with cavalry, we will be bogged down by their rabble, while the archers and enemy cavalry tears us to shreds. It would be a bloodbath. A similar, maybe even more devastating thing would happen if we attacked the flanks with infantry." Lord Domeric thought aloud, as his eyes pierced over the horizon. "We could do both at the same time?" he asked. His Aunt Sansa's husband agreed, albeit reluctantly. That could work, but it would still be ugly." He had to agree with that. He scanned the hills and valleys in front of him again and again, until his eyes rested on the small forest east of the disorganized enemy encampment. He trailed the area around it and slowly followed it back to his own position with his eyes. A small smile started to creep up on his mouth. This didn't go unnoticed by the Lord of the Dread Fort. "You have a plan?" But before I know that it can work, I need to ask you something," he replied. "Me?" Lord Domeric shrugged. "Ask away." "If I were to give Baltasar command of 100 light horsemen to move under the cover of those hills to the east towards those woodlands, could he do it unseen?" He asked the man that was most likely the best cavalry commander in the north, maybe even the whole of West Eos. Lord Bolton scratched through his neatly cut beard, before a soft smile crept upon his own face. "You want to attack the enemy camp?" He nodded. "The rabble situated on those hills has left their homes and livelihood to fight for their idiotic cause. Most will have taken many valuables with them. Others will have looted some from what they deemed traitors or enemies. Many will have their families with them, wives, maybe even children. If we set their camp aflame, they will drop everything to try to protect their possessions and families. After that, we can charge the hills and destroy House Lolliston's forces. Domeric Bolton thought about for a moment, before he nodded approvingly. It is a good plan. To come back to your earlier question, Balthasar can do it. I trained him for this for over a decade myself. He is young, but this he can do. Especially so with that direwolf his mother sent with him for protection. What would you do if they countercharge him? He could be in a very dangerous situation. Lord Bolton was understandably concerned. He had only one surviving son and no brothers. The future of his house was on the line. It wouldn't matter. I would give Balthasar only light cavalry. If he were to encounter serious mounted resistance, he could simply outpace them and fall back to our main line. His answer was seemingly deemed acceptable. How would you divide command? He let the question sink in, thinking it over before responding. Lord Umber would take the center. He can taunt the enemy, while the archers return fire on each other. That way, the enemy's attention is on us and not on Balthasar's movements. Once the camp is aflame, we strike with cavalry on its flanks. I would command the left. You would command the right. You are our best cavalry commander and would be best positioned to run down the fanatic rabble, as well as come to your son's aid if necessary. Good. The simple reply came. What about archers and the reserve? The archers will be commanded by Duran, one of my sergeants. No reserve will be necessary. Once we charge, I want our full might to hit them at once. I agree with having no reserve, but giving a low-born sergeant command of the archers. My vassals won't like that. The head of House Bolton countered. They will have to live with it. Duran is a veteran of my father's wars in the south. Since then, he has been training the Winterfell garrison in archery for over 2 decades. He even taught me and most of my siblings how to shoot a bow. I trust him and I know him to be capable of this. That is what I need on the battlefield, not some overeager noble who could mess up my plans because he wanted to gain glory. Lord Domeric nodded, dropping the topic. I will relay your orders to Lord Umber. Do we set up the army here on top of the hill? Aye, everyone except Balthasar's force. Then we slowly advance from here. I trust you to choose the men in your son's squadron. Lord Bolton silently bowed and rode off, leaving him to contemplate the gravity of the decisions that he had just made. An hour later, he was sitting upon his grey destrier at the head of their cavalry. Hundreds of horsemen from houses Stark, Umber and Dare surrounded him, eagerly awaiting the coming battle. Amongst them was Mors Umber, Lord Umber's second son. He had promised his good father to keep the 20-year-old giant close. Edarian found himself just behind the lines with most of the other squires. They would pull the wounded out of the fighting and provide new weapons when the old ones had broken. More importantly, they would relay messages to him when he found himself in the middle of the fighting. To his right, both archer lines were exchanging fire. The enemy army screamed at his own, while the Northmen under Lord Umber only produced a continuous horrifying rhythm by hitting their swords on their armor and shields. The sound chilled every fighter to the core and its message was clear. For now, we strike upon our shields. Soon, it will be your limbs and head we strike upon. He stood upright on his stirrups, when he could suddenly see smoke rising up from behind the enemy army. He grinned, whilst pointing it out to Mors. Balthasar did it. The Umber produced a menacing smile, and his eyes looked like a hunter getting ready to strike his prey. The giant's brother and father had also seen the smoke, it seemed. The rhythmic slashing of iron on iron stopped, as it was replaced by a loud chant. Our friends are raping your wives and stealing your gold, while you are here wetting your breeches. Could be heard across the plain again and again. The effect was almost immediate. Fear and confusion spread through the enemy ranks, and soon hundreds of the rabble warriors charged back to their burning camp. He grinned. We have them on the run, men. Let's win the day. He screamed loudly, before ordering the hornblower to signal the attack. The horn was immediately answered by the one at the other side. Soon, the horns from the infantry in the center followed suit too. For Winterfell. He screamed at the top of his lungs. For the prince. Sir Dickon Brune shouted in response. For the old gods. Mors Umber easily bellowed over it all. Together they charged up the hill towards the enemy left. The enemy archers got wind of their idea and managed to get a volley off before they reached the enemy line. One arrow hit his left shoulder. Its immediate impact hurt, but it didn't pierce the metal shoulder pad and bound DC off it. He rolled his shoulder to lessen the pain, as he gripped the lance tighter in his other hand. On his signal, a few of his sergeants and some 200 of his riders turned away to catch the enemy horsemen charging against him. He had foreseen the enemy move, but he had made sure that nothing would soften or hinder his charge. In front of them all, Ash jumped 2 enemy soldiers at the front of their line. That, and the hundreds of horsemen thundering towards them, was enough to break the large group of archers. In panic, they ran in all directions. It didn't matter. It only made them easier to kill. He planted his lance in the back of a fleeing archer, before pulling out his sword. He slashed into one's neck on his left, before claiming a hand on his right. He trampled an archer that had fallen, before splitting his companion's head in two. It was absolute carnage. This was no battle, it was a slaughter. He pulled his reins and shouted for others to gather around him. His 2 members of the Wolf's Guard immediately arose at his flanks, as dozens of riders fell in behind them. Morzumber had disappeared in the melee, but he wasn't worried about him. The giant could fight. A knight rode up to him, with 24 others at his back. He raised his visor, and he recognized Sir Roland Rivers, the bastard knight of Dari. "We follow you, my prince. Into the back of the infantry, I presume." He shouted at him. He raised his own visor. "I, Sir Roland. Do me the honor and ride next to me. I want it known that the North and the Riverlands rode beside each other during the charge that broke the enemy formation." The knight seemed touched and guided his horse closer to him. Together, they closed their visors. Cedric Sewin tossed him another lance and he lowered it in front of him, before giving the order to charge. "For House Stark!" he screamed, and dozens of riders charged down towards the back of the enemy infantry line. They hit them at the edge of their line and barreled through it. He stabbed the lance in the chest of a spearman, just before the charge connected and the rest felt like a blur. His sword clashed against a shield and then hit someone on the helmet. Before he knew it, he was through the enemy line. The surprised northern soldiers in front of him shouted their support for their prince, as he turned his horse to charge back into the melee. From the corner of his eye, he saw how the Bolton horse had also struck the enemy from the other side, and then he found himself again amidst the confusing mess of men, horses and steel. He cut an enemy soldier's spear in two, before catching an axe upon his shield from the other side. He turned his horse around, before slicing the axeman's neck open. Soon after, the enemy started surrendering and he led his horsemen out of the fight. The infantry could capture the foot soldiers, there was neither honor nor importance in that task. He pulled back his reins upon the left hill, as he scanned the battlefield. The battle in the center was over and their horsemen were running down the remainder of the archers and rabble left and right. The only force still fighting was the cavalry that had attacked his horsemen at the beginning to try and stop their charge. Together with as many riders as he could find, he clashed into them from the side. He traded blows with the knight in blue, and he started to feel the pain in his shoulder where the arrow had previously hit. Every time that his opponent's mace hit his shield, he winced a little as his shoulder revolted. Still, he kept fighting. He tried to hit the knight on his hand, elbow, shoulder and neck, but the blue fighter managed to block or dodge all his attacks. Frustration and worry slowly crept up on him, as the pain in his shoulder grew exponentially every time the enemy mace cut through the air. Suddenly, a rider stormed behind his opponent and hit the blue knight hard on the back of his helmet with a warhammer. The knight slowly fell from his horse, as blood trickled from under his helmet. The rider he recognized as Sir Roland. The Riverlander tipped his helmet lightly in greeting, before disappearing in the melee. He gathered his breath, as Sir Dickon and Cedric Sewin gathered around him protectively. Not much later, the enemy horsemen either scattered or surrendered. As he rode back to the main fighting, he saw that it had been the same everywhere. Only much further on, at the gate of the castle, fighting continued. Fleeing soldiers were desperately trying to enter the keep, while being cut down by his men from the back. The enemy had closed the gate and was only able to give their fleeing men missile support from above. When they realized this, the last enemies surrendered in droves. Lord Bolton found him soon after the last fighting, guiding his horse next to his. He immediately noticed his discomfort in his shoulder. "What is that?" An arrow slid of it at the beginning of the charge, although the initial impact hurt somewhat. Afterwards, some Riverlander knight thought it a good idea to keep hitting my shield with his mace. My shoulder didn't agree with him. He explained. Where is that knight now? The Lord of the Dread Fort asked him. Dead. He replied. Good. His aunt's husband replied with a grin, as he looked at his shoulder. It doesn't seem to be bleeding much externally, although your skin is heavily bruised and damaged. Have one of the healers look at it now. Umber and I will clean up the battlefield. When you are back, we can take count of the losses and evaluate the battle. He advised him, although it sounded more like an order. He didn't care, as it was good advice. He turned his horse towards their rear. At that moment, Ash appeared out of the crowd. His fur was drenched with blood from muzzle to paw, but he seemed unhurt and happy to see him again. He scratched the large direwolf under his chin, and together they rode back. An hour later, he found himself in his command tent with his commanders and their most important vassals around him. Lord Umber, if you would be so kind as to tell us our losses. He asked his wife's father. The giant nodded, as he rolled out a scroll he had kept in his sword belt. We have lost 156 men, mostly cavalry and archers. Another 273 are significantly wounded, some 40 of those aren't expected to survive. He took in that information. 200 dead wasn't bad to destroy an entire enemy house, as well as an unknown number of zealots. Any significant casualties? Only John Lake, Lord Lake's third son. He was a good lad. He will be missed. The Umber Lord said of his vassal's son. He looked over to Lord Lake, who looked to be both angry and grieving at the same time. You will have your vengeance 10 times over. I promise you that, my lord. He told the lesser lord. Lord Lake silently inclined his head in gratitude. The enemy casualties? He asked. Over 1900 are dead, another 1,000 surrendered. The Lord of Last Hearth replied. Some Bolton vassal whistled, and he was right. Those were serious numbers. That's not even the best of it. We took more than a few notable prisoners. House Lolliston is a huge family. Lord Lolliston himself was captured, although he is a hand short now. The healers tell us he'll survive. Small John Umber shrugged. Lord Lolliston had 5 sons. His second son died, and his fourth son ran inside the keep like a coward. The other 3 are in our custody. He also had 3 brothers. One died when Tywin Lannister ravaged the Riverlands. The other 2 died on the field today. His father's friend took a deep breath, before reading on from the scroll. Together these brothers had 6 living sons. 2 of those were killed today, 3 were captured and 1 ran for the hills. Among those captured, 1 is apparently a member of that wretched faith militant. Small John spat. 3 of his cousins also died, whilst 4 were captured. 2 of his niece's husbands were captured, while his sister's husband and 2 sons, namely Sir Ellery, Emmett and Elmar Margrave, died during Lord Bolton's cavalry charge on the infantry. Gods, were they trying to emulate House Free? Duran remarked, which earned him a few snickers from around the tent. How many escaped? He continued the conversation. Difficult to say. At least 700, half of those managed to get inside the castle. The others scattered to the 4 winds. Mostly rabble fanatics that scattered. He inquired. The scum ran as soon as they saw the smoke rising from their encampment. In their encampment, another 800 women and children were captured. Those cowards even left their own families behind. The giant lord spat. He thought that over. Sir Roland, Sir Damon, Lord Domeric, how soon until your riders are ready to move? He asked, as he looked each of them in the eyes. They looked at each other and shrugged. I can have a significant amount ready in an hour. The Bolton Lord told him, the others said similar things. Good, when you leave here go to them. Go zealot hunting. The more of them you can catch, the greater your reward when you return. He told them, which was met by laughter and support from all in the tent. We wanted the rabble dead. Otherwise, they would scatter and terrorize the local population. What do we do with the prisoners? Sir Damon Greensnake asked him. We can't hold or feed 1,000 men, let alone 800 women and children. Aye, you're right. He turned to one of the Winterfell sergeants. Herald, split the prisoners in 2 groups. Soldiers and knights to one side, secure those as you would other prisoners. The zealous rabble and members of the faith militant on the other side. Of course, my prince. The man replied loyally. Lord Lake. He asked the older man who had just lost one of his sons. What would you say about getting the opportunity to string up hundreds of the bastards at once? The Northman from Long Lake gave him a vicious grin in reply, the anger and hatred beaming out of his eyes. It would do me great pleasure, Prince Ricard. He nodded. Once Herald has finished dividing the prisoners, you oversee the hanging of every one of those fanatics. Give them the usual treatment. Remind them of the customs our ancestors performed on the early Andals. If you wish to take a few heads yourself to calm your anger, I won't stop you. However, they must all be dead by nightfall. I will not tolerate prolonged torture. Do you understand? I understand very clearly, my prince. The Northern Lord replied eagerly, as his vicious grin only grew wider. What about the women and children? Lord Lakesir asked. Give the women to the men. They have earned a reward. Hold the children with the prisoners. The males will be sent to the orphanages at the wall at the earliest convenience, while a solution for the females will be created later on. Both Lord Lake and his eldest son seemed pleased with that. What do we do about the keep? It remains strong and it probably has close to 500 men inside. Sir Roland asked. Before he could answer, Lord Domeric spoke up. I might have a solution. I am listening. Lolliston Grove will be filled with women worried sick about the fate of their husbands and sons. Put all the Lollistons in front of the keep. Take one of their heads every half an hour until the keep surrenders. Have a herald announce it before you begin. I bet it won't take more than an hour before they open their gates. The Lord of the Dread Fort spoke up, honoring his family's gruesome reputation. Many across the room acted with mixed reactions. While they liked the idea of taking the keep without bloodshed, executing nobles like that was not something you undertook lightly. Good plan, we will start with the one that joined the faith militant. By all laws of the kingdom, he is destined to die anyway. Secondly, will be Lord Lolliston. As a traitor to the crown and his overlord Lord Tully, no one will object to his death either. I agree that they will most likely surrender after that. This put most of his nobles at ease, as both had indeed strong cases against them. Have a herald announce it at their gates. It starts in half an hour. He told one of Sir Jean's. Afterwards, he continued talking to his nobles. He asked them about their ideas, comments and grievances both on campaign and at home. When the time was up, he walked onto the field in front of the castle, a one-handed axe in his right hand. The remnants of the enemy encampment were situated some ways behind them, and the leavings of the battlefield laid to his left. The wall in front of him was packed with people, all silently watching him and his army in silence. They had had the time to intervene. They hadn't done so. He shrugged. This first knight had to die anyway. All captured members of House Lolliston found themselves on their knees in the mud, bound at their ankles and wrists. With a few words, he ordered his guards to put the head of Sir Humphrey Lolliston on the chopping block. He looked at the Riverlander's tabard with disdain. It was white, like all the others in his family. However, only half of it was decorated with the tree-brown barrels of House Lolliston. The other half displayed the 7-pointed star in its many colors. The knight had visually chosen to join the faith militant, he would now face the consequences. He pushed the man's head down harshly into the block, rendering him unable to speak. In the name of my father, King Robb Stark, I sentence you, Sir Humphrey Lolliston, to die for joining a religious order against the laws of the kingdom. Do you have any last words? He asked the Riverlander knight. He pulled his hand back, to allow him to breathe and speak. You heathens will burn in the 7 hells. The followers of the 7 will come for you and burn your false idols and your trees. You will rue the day you opposed the might of the only true gods. You! Sir Humphrey Lolliston screamed, but he cut him off. He didn't have time for this sort of rambling. The axe came down upon the neck of the knight, cutting of his curses and trading them in for screams. It took him 3 swings to cut his head off with the one-handed axe, but that didn't matter. He silently handed the blooded axe to Rion and walked forward. All other members of House Lolliston looked at him in horror as he picked up the head of what had been Sir Humphrey and walked forward with it towards the walls. Just out of arrow range, he threw it as hard as he could towards the walls. It bumped and rolled until it laid still some 30 feet from the walls. From atop them, screams could be heard, but he paid it no mind. Put Lord Lolliston on the block, he ordered to some of his guards, who immediately obeyed. Osric Umber raised his eyebrow at him. Weren't we going to wait half an hour between each of the executions? He shrugged. We don't have time for this. They will have to decide more quickly, he told his good brother. The Umber heir simply nodded, before ordering one of his men to announce his decision to the castle. He waited 5 more minutes, before asking his axe back from his squire and walking over to Lord Lolliston. Just as he prepared to ask him for his last words, the gates opened. A lone rider with a makeshift white flag rode towards his line. The rider was no older than him and wore the same style of tunic as the prisoners in the field. He stopped some 40 feet away from him, before proudly announcing himself. My name is Sir Edmund Lolliston. I am the 4th son of Lord Lucian Lolliston. I would like to start negotiations. Ash stalked over to him and growled loudly, panicking the rider's horse. Scared, it threw him off into the mud, before galloping back towards the open gates of the castle. Humiliated, the knight got up. He tried to clean some of the worst mud from his armor, but soon gave up on it. Silently, he locked eyes with the Lolliston knight. It was clear that the 4th son was never taught how to command. The Riverlander did his best but threw more and more uncertain glances in the directions of his father and elder brother as the time passed. Finally, he spoke up. My terms are the following. You will open your gates to us and disarm your soldiers. You will willingly hand over every zealot or member of the faith militant to us. In turn, you, your family and your keep will be spared. What about my father and brothers? What about all the family members here on the field? Sir Edmund Lolliston asked him. They will face the king's judgment in Riverrun. They took up arms against the king in name of a false claimant. He simply replied. What will you do with the zealous peasants? They will die. They followed the orders of a foreign entity to murder, rape and steal from my father's subjects on the basis of their religion or their alleged alliance with old gods believers. This is unforgivable. There is no world where any of them walk away from this alive. He responded. Sir Edmund swallowed, while shooting a look to his father. What if we refuse? He shrugged. We will storm the keep and take it sooner or later. The castle will be sacked, as my men pillage your family's property and rape your women. Your keep will be torn down, and your lands will be salted. All adult males, including you, will be killed and the boys will be sent to the orphanages at the wall. The remaining women and girls will be sent to the Silent Sisters. I would normally say the septs, but it seems that they do more bad than good these days. The eyes of the knight went wide. You can't do that. We are an old noble family, stemming from the first coming of the Andals to West Eos. I can and I will, if I must. You are given a choice to save your family and your name. If you refuse, that is your choice. However, in that case I will make sure that no one will remember the name Lolliston in 50 years, whether it has been around since the coming of the Andals or not. Your allies from the Reach never showed this courtesy to houses Parrel or Menning. Their lands were destroyed and their families assaulted, while they never broke an oath in their lives. Be grateful that you even get this opportunity. It would be in my right to eradicate your treacherous house once and for all, but I give you an honorable way out. Take it or leave it, but you know the consequences either way. The knight visibly seemed to panic, as he looked to his father for help. Lord Lolliston was still bent over the wooden log on which his nephew had been executed not long ago. Nevertheless, he chose to speak. Think of your children and those of your siblings, Edmund. Take the deal and advise your nephew Harold until he comes of age in our absence. Think of the family. It must persist. Lord Lucian Lolliston told his 4th son. As fate would have it, he would seal his own when he added the next sentence. Make those northern savages swear to honor the deal on their trees. It is the only way to get them to keep their word. He looked the River Lord in his eyes and he realized that Lord Lucian knew what saying those words meant. Nevertheless, he had uttered them anyway. Sir Edmund looked at him. I accept your offer, on the condition that you swear to it on your gods. He pierced into the knight's eyes, anger boiling up inside him. A streak of the wolf's blood his aunts and grandmother had called it ever since he was young. He pushed his anger down. There was a time and place for it, and it wasn't now. I swear on the old gods to honor the terms I gave you before, as long as you keep yours. From the moment that you fail to honor your part, this vow is null and void. He told the Riverlander knight, who nodded meekly. Now, you will personally escort my men inside. You will order the garrison to put down their weapons. If you even think about laying a trap, I will execute all those on the field here, while my men make sure that you don't come out of that keep alive either. Do you understand? The Lolliston knight nodded silently. He turned to Osric Umber. Take 800 men and march into the keep. Secure the gate and the walls and disarm the garrison. Gather the whole Lolliston family inside their hall. I will come inside once everything is secure. You kill anyone that resists, highborn or lowborn. Osric nodded, before bellowing orders to the lines of his father's men. Lords Bolton and Umber immediately walked over to him. Both congratulated him on securing the keep without any more bloodshed, and they talked about their strategy on how to deal with the rest of the Lolliston family. What will you do about old Lucian? Lord Domeric asked. His words cannot go unpunished. He agreed. They can't. He will die for those words. Still, executing him now would not be beneficial. We will take him with us back to Riverrun, where I will execute him myself when the time comes. No one calls me or my countrymen savages and lives to tell the tale. Lords Umber and Bolton nodded approvingly, before going to aid Osric in the task he had been given. Remembering his own anger when he had been called a savage by Lord Lolliston, he walked over to where the man was still laying on the log of wood. He walked over to him, as he ordered a guard to keep him down. He put his mouth next to the man's ear and whispered softly. No one calls me or my countrymen savages. We will meet again under the same circumstances soon and then your blood will paint the courtyard of Riverrun red. Use your remaining time to make peace with your beloved gods. He backed up and pointed to two guards. You two, take Lord Lolliston away. Make sure that he is guarded and kept away from the other prisoners at all times. The older and most experienced of the two immediately stepped forward. Of course, my prince. He replied, with a small bow. He and his companion put their arms under the shoulders of the River Lord and carried him off. He then pointed to a few other guardsmen. You, take the others away. Put them with the other prisoners for now. Once we have secured the keep, they will be transported to the dungeons. All men bowed, and the other Lollistons were carried off as well. He walked back into the camp and mingled among Lower Bolton nobles together with his cousin Balthasar. They passed a sack of wine amongst themselves to pass the time, as his men put up their camp around him. In the meantime, his cousin and squire Edarian Sawin brought him his copper and iron crown. After a while, the now familiar Umber war horns were heard. Nevertheless, they didn't call for battle. They gave the usual command to advance. Clever thinking on Osric's part to tell them that the coast was clear to advance into the castle. Most of the lower nobles scattered to check on their men, while he and Balthasar walked over to their horses with the two direwolves. They were soon joined by Sir Dickon Brune and Cedric Sawin, as well as Lords Bolton and Umber and their retainers. Together they rode towards the keep, entering it through the gate under the square tower. Outside, zealots were guided towards the forests by dozens of his men, while in the courtyard, hundreds of disarmed regular soldiers stood awaiting their fate. Most of them stepped back from him the moment they noticed Ash. He looked over towards his direwolf, whose ashen fur that had lent him his name was red from all the dried blood. Ash's muzzle was scarlet, and he bared his teeth at the disarmed enemy soldiers. He held his reins and looked over the hundreds of men gathered together in the courtyard. He ignored the itch coming from his bandaged arm and spoke up. You have two options in front of you. You can tell me that you only took up arms against me because you were forced to do so by your overlords. To prove this, you can voluntarily ask to join my forces to fight against the other rebels and religious fanatics. Your other option is that you hold your ground and bravely tell me that you fought against me for what you believed to be a just cause. It is a choice that I will respect, and which will give you your freedom. However, this decision will cost you your sword hand, to make sure that you can never again take up arms against houses Stark or Tully. The choice is yours. Those willing to join our ranks can enlist with Lord Bolton." He looked at Lord Domeric, who grinned at him before jumping off his horse together with some of his guards. The Lord of the Dread Fort knew what to do. Without another word, he led his horse towards the keep in the back. He dismounted on the steps in front of it, and he and his entourage were guided inside towards the Lolliston Hall by an umber sergeant. The hall was small and insignificant, and filled with members of its ruling house. He saw at least 25 children, a dozen women and only 3 men. Sir Edmund stood in the middle, next to a boy of around 12 years old. He walked over towards them, flanked by his 2 Kingsguard members and his direwolf. All backed up at the side, but he simply walked on until he was right in front of the boy. "Harold Lolliston, I presume?" he asked the boy, who nodded with great difficulty. He looked around the room filled with the boy's kin, before locking eyes with him again. "I will make it easy for you. You are nobles and you deserve to be treated as such, as long as you don't oppose us. You surrendered the keep, we expect this to remain the same or your adult men will suffer for it," he voiced, while locking eyes with many of the women around him before turning back to the boy. "My forces and I will rest here for a few days, before we continue. A garrison will be installed here to keep the area under our control. Harold and Sir Edmund may remain here, together with Harold's mother, brother and sisters and Sir Edmund's wife and children, on the condition that they help pacify the region. All the others will be accompanied towards the twins, where they will be treated with the respect deserving of their noble status. Once the war has ended, most of you will all be allowed to return home without a ransom. Some of the children will of course be raised as wards in other castles across the kingdom," he ruled. One of the older women seemed to conquer her fears of his direwolf and dared to ask him a question. "What about my husband and sons? Lady Lolliston, I presume?" he asked, to which she nodded in confirmation. "One of your sons died in the fighting. Your husband and the other 3, as well as all their cousins and other family members, will be escorted to Riverrun where they will be judged for their treason by the king," he responded calmly. "The others, they remain alive?" another younger woman asked. "Aye, those that survived the fighting remain alive and are in our custody. The only exception being Sir Humphrey, as he had joined the Stars and Swords, an act penalized with death in the Kingdom of the North and the Riverlands." The younger woman seemed to be relieved, while others looked to be even more angry now. "Can we ask you who of our family died in the fighting? We haven't had the luxury of receiving this information," the old Lady Lolliston asked him. He shrugged and turned to his father-in-law. "Lord Umber, would you be so kind as to tell the lady which of her family members perished during the battle?" "Of course, my prince." Smalljan boomed, as he pulled a scroll out of his belt. "Lord Lolliston's second son, Sir John Lolliston, died in the fighting, as well as 2 of the Lord's brothers Sirs Hoster and Benjicot Lolliston. 2 of his nephews, namely Sirs Alan and William Lolliston, fell on the field together with 3 of his cousins Sirs John Ows, Stefan and Brian Lolliston. On top of that, Lord Lolliston lost his good brother Sir Ellery Margrave, as well as his 2 sons Sir Emmett and Sir Elmar Margrave. 2 other knights who were connected to the family also died, namely Sir Jimmy Pale and Sir Damon Scollop." The Lord of Last Hearth put away the scroll, as many of the women started crying amongst themselves, with some of them throwing hateful glances his way. "Now, I would ask you all to go back to your rooms under the guidance of my guards. All of you, except those living closest to the Lord's rooms. Those rooms will be claimed by my own nobles, other sleeping arrangements will be found for you in the meantime," he ruled, before signaling his guards to kindly push them out of the hall. He turned towards Smalljan Umber and his son Osric, who had walked into the hall during the conversation. "Both of you pick a room to your liking close to the Lord's rooms. I will pick that one for myself and I want you close." Both grinned at him in response. "Have your guards search the rooms for any possible dangers first, but let their belongings be. There will be enough plunder in the future to satiate your needs," he continued. "Aye, my prince," father and son replied, before storming off with a handful of their retainers. He then turned to Baltasar Bolton. "You can do the same, cousin. Pick one for your father as well, but make sure that they are safe first. I don't want the singers to make parallels between my campaign and the young dragon's conquest of Dawn. The Bolton heir marched off next, half a dozen retainers following behind him. Sir Dickon Brune then came to him. "Will we be clearing the Lord's rooms for you first, Prince Ricard?" "Aye, my trusted friend. Take 5 guards with you and turn the whole room upside down. I will climb the keep to take a look at the area around us." "It will be done, my prince." Sir Dickon Brune grinned, before ordering Cedric Sewin to stay with their prince at all times. He climbed the stone-cut stairs of the keep, before walking onto the stone floor. He walked over to the battlements, looking across the fertile valleys and hills of the central riverlands. Little Rion took his place beside him and looked across the area as well. "It is so, Green," Aunt Arya's second son remarked in wonder. He chuckled. "Aye, the riverlands are very fertile. They are one of the 2 main breadbaskets of Westeros. They are invaluable for the north, as they could easily produce enough food to help sustain and even grow our country's population. At the same time, its many river towns bring in much appreciated coin to the crown's coffers." He responded, before sighing. "The problem of the riverlands is not in its value, it's its stability. Before the Targaryens, it was ravaged at least each generation. The Dragon Lords famed themselves upon pacifying Westeros, but even under their rule regular conflict destroyed the riverlands. Its people are as divided as its lands are plentiful. If we wish to hold on to it, we will need to fight for it, little cousin. You think that we won't be able to defeat and pacify the rebels?" Edarion asked in shock. He shook his head. "Oh, we will. The instigators will be dealt with, and its people pacified. Afterwards, the land will begin to heal again. Its population will replenish, and its harvests will become plentiful again. Nevertheless, another problem will arise that will divide its cumbersome people, and before long they will be at odds again." His Sewin cousin looked at him weirdly. "My father has hopes of pacifying the region once and for all, and he will try his best, but I have my doubts. In my opinion, every generation the North will have to send its warriors south to retain its possessions and food supply. We will do so, as the riverlands are too valuable to lose. Nevertheless, there will always be a neighboring power looking to expand its influence, and stupidly ambitious riverlords to give them the opportunity to try. Isn't the North allied with the majority of the other kingdoms in Westeros?" The second-born son of House Sewin asked him. "Aye, for now." His cousin asked him to explain what he meant, and so he did. "The Arryns are our friends, but if they ever wish to expand, they will come into conflict with us. Nonetheless, due to my sister Birina's marriage, the Arryns won't dare to lift a finger for the next 2 generations. The Ironborn are too weak to try anything on their own for now, and our alliance brings too much profit in the pockets of Lord Harris for him to even contemplate it." He started. "The Lannisters' power has been curtailed by my father, but they are slowly rebuilding. By the time that your sons have become men, they will have risen anew. A similar story will be true for the Baratheons. Will Cousin Margaret's betrothal not make the Stormlands our friends, like with the Vale?" Rion remarked sharply. He nodded approvingly. "Aye, my little sister's betrothal to the second son of Queen Shireen, Stannis, will pacify the border for the time being. Their rule over Summerhall will especially help to keep the Reach in check in the future. A thing which is sorely needed. The Reach is behind this rebellion, isn't it? I heard my father and mother talk about it before we left home." "Aye, they are. The rulers of the Reach, House Tyrell, have used their border lords to stir up trouble. They also used the High Septon to incite the Seven Believers to make war upon us. Many of the peasants have heeded that call," he answered. Rion frowned. "I still don't understand how these Southrons think that an old man with an expensive gemstone hat is the voice of the gods on earth." He laughed loudly and had to agree with his 13-year-old cousin. It was a ridiculous idea. The voice of the gods could be heard in the rustling of the leaves, or the peaceful rippling and gurgling of a stream. Not through some fat aristocrat in Old Town he didn't care about. Nevertheless, they would have to do something about this particular fat aristocrat. His orders had led to the death of thousands upon thousands of old gods believers, and still more were being persecuted every day. That was without even concerning the tens of thousands of Andal dead. It was all just so pointless, but someone would have to answer for it, and, if someone asked him, that fat prick wouldn't be able to escape the dance. Chapter 86, An Unexpected Arrival. 28f. Ricard Stark. He looked at Uncle Rukan in the solar of Castle Diari, as they kept debating the issue at hand. His uncle wanted to gather 3,000 men and march on Southhorn. He wanted to bury the bodies there, before uniting with Houses Sumber and Riker to exterminate House Rollingford for good. He had told him about the dangers of such an endeavor half a dozen times by now. The road was way too close to Harrenhal, they didn't know where Lord Rollingford was, and there could be other ambushes. His father needed them at Riverrun, but it made no difference. His uncle honored his epithet of wild wolf with every word that came out of his mouth. Many would think that his wrath had been fed enough with his treatment of House Terrick, but that didn't seem to be the case. His father's youngest brother had heard about Southhorn only days after arriving at Falconry Tower. The next day a terrible assault had started which had resulted in the capture of the Terrick's ancestral castle. It had also resulted in the death of Lord Terrick and his two brothers, as well as his only adult son. Uncle Rukan had only spared the women and children. He knew that it was personal for him. Martin Castle, now known as Lord Hayford, had been one of his best friends growing up. Martin's younger brother Edric remained his ever-present shadow to this day. What had happened to their sister and her family was horrible. He felt sympathetic to the issue, as he wanted to end House Rollingford as much as any Northman did. Nevertheless, it remained a bad idea to march on them now, but his lords, and uncle, wouldn't accept leaving the lords of Blackwater Bay to their own devices any longer. What if we do both? He finally relented. What do you mean both? Rukan asked. We send troops to aid the lords of Blackwater Bay, but you still accompany me and the vast majority of our forces to Riverrun. He responded. Who would you send? Lord Donalloch and 1,000 Northmen can continue to Maidenpool together with 500 men from Cracklaw Point. They can march along the coast there towards Riverport. That should protect the lands there from being ravaged by our enemies. It would also allow our forces to rally at Riverrun with enough strength to confront Elmar. The Pretender has marched from Stony September. We need to cut off the head of the snake quickly. I still don't like it. Rukan countered. It should be a Stark that brings justice to our people along the Blackwater. Only the running direwolf would send the right message. He sighed. Uncle, destroying House Rollingford won't win this war. It won't allow you to go back to your daughter. Beating Elmar could do that. He saw a change in Uncle Rukan's eyes then, and he knew he had him. They went back and forth a few more times, but in the end he relented. When his uncle finally left, he felt relieved. With Elmar marching on Pink Maiden, the threat was coming closer. All houses in the area, except for the Pipers, were nominally neutral. If Elmar's presence became strong enough in that region, some would feel forced to join him in his rebellion. This couldn't happen, and his father had ordered all their men to gather at Riverrun. Only Lord Hornwood would remain in the Twins with 500 men to prepare for the arrival of their second army. A second army that could be needed, as their spies told them that the Lannisters and Tyrells were rallying their forces. His compromise to send Lord Locke south went against the orders of his father, and he would not be happy about it. He just hoped his father would forgive him when he arrived with the forces of the Eastern Riverlords instead. After taking Lolliston Grove, he had left a garrison there under Sir Roland Rivers and the remaining troops of House Diari. Afterwards, Rukan and the Riverlords had gathered at Castle Diari, and they had met up there. In total, their force here numbered over 10,000 men now. They had set out with 6,000 Northmen. 2,500 men from Cracklaw Point had been rallied, and 3,000 men from the Riverlands had joined their cause. If you stripped away their losses and the garrisons they had left behind at Falconry Tower and Lolliston Grove, you were left with a force between 10 and 11,000 men. 1,500 men would march south, the others would march west. All local houses had voiced their fears. Many zealous and rebel groups had been destroyed, but not all of them. They effectively left their lands defenseless. He had agreed with the sentiment, but had ordered it nonetheless. He had proposed that the noble families temporarily evacuated to the Twins, but they had all refused. Some would evacuate to Maidenpool instead, as they probably didn't want to come under the thumbs of Northern rule. He didn't mind. These lords were loyal. He wouldn't try to get their families in his grasp. They deserved better. They had done a good job in the region, effectively ridding the land of all zealots north of the Red Fork. On top of that, all organized resistance between the Maidenpool-Harrenhal line and the Riverrun-Dare line had also been destroyed. Scattered warbands and a lot of neutral houses remained there, but all lordly houses and large landed knights who had bent to Elmar there had been dealt with. Nevertheless, his forces would take no chances. They would follow the river road from Castle Dare to Riverrun with dozens of scouts on all sides. He would not meet the same fate as his maternal kinsman had at Southhorn. 12 days later. Riverrun's redstone walls doomed up over the water of the Red Fork. The reflection of their towers and flags visible in the rust-colored water. On top of its towers, next to the trout of House Tully, the direwolf of his house fluttered proudly in the wind. It was a welcome sight. An even better sight was the large army encampment south of the river. Some 20,000 men had gathered. Together with his 9,000 soldiers, it would be a significant force. He rode through the encampment to make sure that the whole army saw him arrive with the reinforcements. For the occasion, he wore his bronze and iron crown. Sir Dickon Brune and his uncle Rickon rode next to him, with Ash and Shaggadog in front. Behind him, Rion followed with Cedric Sewin and Morgan Barclay. His lords and troops had scattered upon arrival. He had ordered them to set up camp first and had given them leave to seek their family members and friends afterwards. Nonetheless, the entrance of 2 princes, 3 Wolf's Guard members and their 30-men-strong Stark retinue that followed them didn't go unnoticed. He passed many known faces and greeted a lot of noblemen on his way to the keep. Some congratulated him for his victory at Lolliston Grove, while others congratulated Uncle Rickon for successfully storming Falconry Tower. At the inner edge of the camp, Meager Sewin greeted them together with Nymeria. He talked for a while with his cousin, before granting his squire leave to go with his elder brother towards the Sewin encampment. He still found it odd to see Meager with a direwolf, but he knew the story behind it. Aunt Arya had only allowed her 2 eldest sons to accompany her husband to war, if her eldest took Nymeria with him. Meager was no warg, he knew that much, but Aunt Arya definitely was. With how the female direwolf had stared at him just now, he wouldn't be surprised to hear that Aunt Arya was keeping close watch on her son. In the end, only the 5 of them, and their guard contingent, remained when they entered through the gates of Riverrun. There, he was met by hugs of not only his brother and father, but also multiple of his cousins. "Hose, it is good to see you again," he exclaimed, as he embraced the lord of the castle. "It is very good to see you too, cousin." Hoster smiled back. Next up, Bryn congratulated him on his victory and his Karstark cousins followed suit. Hose presented him to his daughters, while he exchanged war stories with his brother and the Karstarks. After a while, his father motioned for him to follow him upstairs to the solar. Uncle Rickon walked behind him, while his uncle Torrin remained his father's ever-present shadow. Once they had entered the Tully solar, he saw that his uncle John was already there waiting for them. His father closed the door ceremoniously. "Thank you for coming back so quickly. The situation has changed since we parted ways," he started, as he walked behind the desk, on which a map of the Riverlands was spread out. "The slaughter at Southhorn has changed the playing field. It resulted in the complete removal of Old Gods believers in the area around Southhorn and a third of those living on the Hayford lands. It has emboldened the fanatics, and their rhetoric has radicalized even more. There are 7 of the most devout marching with the faith militant. 2 of them have now called for a march on Blackwood Vale to kill every unbeliever. He explained, a deep frown resting on his head. His father seemed worried. "Southron nobles have since started saying that ridding the Blackwater Bay of our kind is not only plausible, but recommendable. Our spies have recorded movements in Wayfarer's Rest, Stonehenge and Lichester after the battle. Discussions in the courts of Houses Grill, Shawnee and Chelstead seem to have changed as well. They seem to have been seriously deliberating joining Elmar." His father told them, which shocked him. This would bring in many thousands of extra soldiers for the enemy. "Why haven't they?" Uncle Rickon bluntly countered. His father smiled a little. "Because of you two. The fates of houses Terrick and Lolliston became known soon after what happened at Southhorn. It seemed that it made those neutral houses think again of what could happen to them if they picked a side and lost. They are scared to bet on the wrong horse. His father's younger brother scoffed with disgust. They are. They are squished between on one side the possibility of ridding their lands from us forever, and on the other side facing the destruction of their power and houses. His father confirmed. Whatever they choose, we can't let them get away with this. He told his fathers and uncles. They will simply lay low until another opportunity to hit us presents itself later on. They won't simply get away with this. His father replied. However, it would be best if we could deal with them independently from this rebellion. All agreed upon that. Sadly, it seems that the news of your victories